agenda.
Motion by Schulte, support from the board to approve the agenda for June 25. Any comments, discussion? All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Next, we look at the minutes from our last meeting, June 18.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion for approval from the board. Support from Jones. Further discussion? All those in favor of the June 18 minutes signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. July meetings, we likely use the 9th and the 23rd, anything else we're aware of?
Looks good to me.
And motion from Elmers for the 9th and the 23rd, with support from Schulte. Any other comment, concerns? All those in favor of that July schedule then, signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Discussion is cameras at the ambulance garage.
Every cut one. I think we from the last time. Yeah, it's the last one. Oh, over here.
Sandy, are you going to share a little bit about
Yes,
your
so, Ernie and I have talked about this several times, first of all, we have never lost any narcotics. You know, what we're talking about for supplies, and we have kind of fixed that problem, is where the ice packs 4x4s are ones that supply room. Ernie and I put a lock pad on that door. What we're missing in our ambulances are our battery boosters. Those kinds of things are exposed. I'm not opposed to putting cameras outside of our building. However, I want to make sure that it's secure, that we're able to see all over that parking lot. Not only who comes in there, but I'd like to be able to identify who's coming in there, and then possibly maybe getting the license plate number of when they leave, and what's in their hand when they do leave. In the past year, we have replaced at least 2 of our battery boosters. If somebody's come in, taking it, maybe somebody's charged the battery. But the thing that this group needs to know is that just about everybody has a passcode to that door. Past, present, employees, whether they be from our service, coming in, refilling our oxygen, doing electrical work, everybody has the passcode to that building.
Do you periodically change that passcode?
We have, but then we have to start all over again, giving that out to the service people that come in to do service work on those vehicles, whether it be the county car or the county ambulance. We have,
because I know a lot of places have a code just for the people doing service work, and then a code for the service for the employees.
okay.
So I don't know that you need to say one for everybody. It should be able to handle more than one code to get in there. So if your service people have one code, then your other people have another code, you should be able to keep track of who's coming in and out.
Oh, I I think get more of a computerized
Yes.
type lock thing. Yeah.
Is that thing
Or at least we
capable of
could
doing
probably look into that, that's not, I'm not
And when it's on there, we'll be capable of.
and the biggest thing right now is every time we have like event that happens, we try to plug the hole. I mean, when, you know, we were thinking that we were missing more ice packs and stuff like that, we went and got the lock for the supply room. The latest thing is trying to remind people that when they open that door and they shut that, to make sure the door is shut, because when they walk in and they don't check that, the door is partially open. When you have people that come and pick up those vehicles, they somehow think that they need to come inside and tell me they're picking up their vehicle. And it's kind of weird having stranger danger coming into my building. I mean, so, yeah, I'm not aware of that. That's our biggest, and we put a sign on the door to make sure that people shut that door.
But
But
that door should be.
Ernie, is that door to the west, is that always locked?
It's always locked.
Okay.
Never unlocked.
All right. You know, there's that other path, and we had kind of entertained that thought too, is possibly,
Yeah, the only time that door's ever unlocked is whenever we're doing anything.
is maybe just getting that passcode out, or putting the passcode on it, and then having just, the courthouse people just using that door to get your county cards. I don't know, we've thought about putting up a wall, and, you know, Ernie and I have, this has been kind of an ongoing project for us for several years. But to, you know, I just do want to make that known that we have never lost any narcotics, we've never lost any drugs, but, the fact that those ambulances are sitting there, you know, they're kind of vulnerable, but, we just want to make sure that building is secure and that our investment in those two rigs are secure. Because everything else is locked up. I mean, you know, they can't get to anything, you know, like,
Have you lost things, a lot of things, or?
well, I mean, mostly it's just, I mean, in the past, we've taken care of the supply room as far as that goes. But, as far as the battery boosters, that's about the biggest thing that we have found that, you know, that we're missing, you know, and we're replacing, or those.
The batteries themselves, or the packs, the chargers?
Well,
or what?
yeah, there's like those charger things, you can charge batteries.
Jump started.
Yeah, there we go. I'm not sure, but I know they're expensive. So, yeah, I guess, as far as cameras inside, outside, it's totally up to you, but, you know, if you're gonna put them on the outside, make sure that we are able to identify people that are coming in and who they are, and if they're leaving with something that they shouldn't be. That's our main concern.
I don't know, how would you know if they were leaving with something that they shouldn't?
Well, if they walked out with a $35,000 Life Pack 15, then, yeah, they have no business taking that out. I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the big expensive
But
stuff.
if you walked in with a bag and walked out with a bag, I mean, I don't.
Well, I mean, you know, if they walked in and they are not from, I mean, there's only 22 EMS members, so they shouldn't be, you know, no one should be walking in with coming out with a backpack or,
I mean, if they were in there to get supplies or something else, they'd
yeah,
obviously bring a bag.
normally, if they come in for supplies, usually then they come in when I'm there. They don't just, you know, come in the middle of the night and take stuff anymore. That's why I'm just a little concerned. Yeah, anything more that you'd like to add?
No, that's why it'd be nice just to have camera inside so that you can see what you're walking in or walking out with.
You know, like the oxygen guy, the one, he should just be only leaving with cylinders. He should be leaving with anything else.
I went and checked with Evertech, checked the system out over there, and they all seem to be identical to, yeah,
Their clarity and stuff is
Yeah.
very good on those camera
yep,
systems.
and they zoom in,
They zoom in.
yep,
Is there a monthly bill besides this?
no,
Just go right over the internet.
What?
Just go right over the internet.
I guess I'm too trusting that. I feel if they're gonna steal something, they're gonna steal it, no matter if they got cameras or not, that's my opinion.
But at least then we know who did it.
No, not necessarily.
no.
Hopefully you do, that you recognize the people.
We'll put signs and we'll put stickers up there that there was gonna be cameras inside the building.
I think, to be
I think
honest,
that would be, I do think that would be sufficient.
I personally think we should address the lock issue first and decide who's gonna know who has what passcodes and start there.
And where would you go to look for something like that? Is that like a software, are we talking?
Perhaps maybe Evertech has it, I don't know. I just know that a lot of places I've been, that's the way they handle vendor interactions in and out of the buildings. Vendors have one code, employees have another. Now, you know, who came and went,
And that keeps track of who's in and out.
everybody gets a code. Or you can upgrade to a key card,
Oh,
everybody's got an
yeah, key card is another.
identifiable key card.
Yeah.
It's unique to you, so you know who came and went out of the building. Yeah,
Yeah,
yep,
I think I should look into that.
it probably wouldn't hurt.
I wonder if they would be okay for like in the wintertime and stuff.
Yep,
Yeah.
well, schools have them.
School has it, they just got a fob, you swipe, or I don't know what you do with it.
But then about that time, it was calling in the middle of the night and they left their home. Then what do you do?
Guess you're out of luck.
Yeah.
Well, there's 3 or 4 people that count, maybe keeping the, I don't know, everybody has to have them. So they do at the school, and they know who's coming and going.
Be something to look into.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Maybe talk with the school and see what's out there. Key card system.
Yeah, that would be, you know, then we would only maybe just give out one key card to co-op, one to general, one to first.
I think that actually reports who's coming and going.
Should log in.
How good are these quotes? How long are they good
I
for?
think you got 3 or 4 now.
It's great.
But how long are they good, 30 days or 60 days or?
And, 60 days.
I think we have exposure and significant investment there that I don't think this is wanting to take this, we want to investigate further approaches. I'm open to that, but
I guess I really don't see nothing wrong like with Evertech, but again, we used to keep an eye on the outside.
And then we could always sit back cameras if we needed.
does this go to your computer as well or not? Because you said there are instances where people come in and surprise you. Would this
Yeah.
have something on the
Yeah.
screen that would?
Yep. There'll be 2 monitors, one that can be in their office, and the other monitor will be at the dispatch. And they both have the same access to it. And Evertech says that they can also pull it up on their cell phone.
Do they have a deal on it where like you'll hit, I know Evertech does, I don't know about the other two, but once the camera kicks in, it'll notify your phone, and you can look at your phone and see who's there.
Is that what?
All 3 systems
Yeah.
are the same.
Okay.
So I
Could be a nuisance.
Well, depends,
Yeah.
depends on who you wanna put in charge of that.
Yeah, they didn't have an alarm that went like that.
Guess the other thing I was thinking was like with the cars at the sheriff's department, yeah, at least that way they can keep track of what's going on with them.
So it's just on the outside, sure.
Yeah.
If you use the school as an example, they have cameras on the inside and outside.
Yeah.
Did you give an indication on if we just did the exterior, what the savings would be, or?
No, I didn't, no.
I think the price is the same.
I guess I could see going with Evertech. I'll make that motion, yeah.
Second.
Motion for Evertech, is that as quoted, for interior and exterior? Motion from Schulte. Jones, proceed to the Evertech quote. Further discussion? All those in favor of that motion signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Thank you, guys. Mileage and meal reimbursement, 1920. Starting in just a few days. Current,
For $3 a day for meal and 40 cents per mile.
Is there any reason that we don't do the IRS rate for mileage?
We never have, so I don't know why we don't, never have it in the past.
Every county seems to have a different
They do.
number running for mileage.
This rate has been average many years,
Probably around that.
It has 40 cents per mile.
I know third judicial, when I run to Sioux City, they pay 39 cents. They're at the top of the scale.
Federal's 58 cents.
And that's our,
Clay County is 35 cents.
yeah, all we would, I'd say, the only one I could see maybe changing would be meals. Just where you go out to eat, you don't get much for $30 anymore. But we could leave that too, I don't care.
All right. What are you gonna do? Let the kids are alone.
Yeah.
I guess I could, yeah, I'm okay with the $30 a day, I can come out with 45 cents a mile. Yeah, 40 a long time.
Whichever.
I'll make that motion.
That's second.
Support from Jones that the per diem would remain at 30 per day, and the mileage of 45 cents per mile. That's correct?
Yep.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of that meal and mileage reimbursement amount, those amounts signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign.
We gave one of the drivers.
does he keep track of all the phone calls, those stuff he gets, does he get paid for that?
I don't know, he just keeps a log, I think, and
I'm almost thinking it'd be easier to salary him than going by the hour.
mentioned that too. And he gets paid $25 per well, which is really good.
So I know I've been around him like a golf and stuff, and his phone's going off.
That's the only time we can get a hold of him during working hours.
No, but I'm just saying, how does he keep track of his time that way? That'd be awful hard.
You've got everybody around here calling for inspections on tanks, I don't know how he keeps track of them.
That's why I'm thinking it'd be easier just to go so much a month.
What is the average?
I don't know, if that's something we'd have to sit and look at.
I don't know, 4,000, 4,500 a year maybe, something there. But then that's, I don't know, I would have to go back, because that probably includes the well that he gets paid for too, so.
And would we have to look at something like that when we do this then, or?
Probably either beginning of fiscal year, or thinking about for next year, maybe at budget time.
Okay.
If all these people are under the union contract, does it really,
We might not need to, it's one of those things I've always done it, and Dave Noble kind of looked at all of
it
it.
doesn't make any sense to do it, if they're under contract with the union, we can't yay or nay it anyway.
Right. It's just nice for our office to have some kind of documentation as to what they are, so that we can make sure they're getting, so they could do a spreadsheet, I guess, and tell us what everybody is doing. This is the first time we've done something with road employees, never done the road crew, which took it. We're doing it now this year.
I mean, that's separate from.
Yeah, they're not union anymore, and we've never done the road crew, but this year, we talked to Dave, and maybe that'd be a good idea.
But then we are doing the sheriff's department.
We are doing them too, yeah, and we've always.
But you weren't doing the road crew.
No,
when you were-
I know, that makes sense.
I give up.
If it's the rates we agreed to, that's good. As long as
We agreed to the contract, and everything was good with the union, and,
Yep. That's why I say it's something we
So we're hiring them, these are salary appointments, so we're just assigning a salary to.
But we've already got a union contract, I don't know.
The union.
Why that makes sense, why would you have one in there, because that's a whole separate law.
That's very real, if you agree to the raise they're gonna get, you set that, so, and that's what that, all that stuff.
Oh, John will be here shortly, so I guess we'll just.
Can ask him.
Please meet you. Yeah, I gotta leave at noon too, I gotta meet the DCI director.
You want a 20-minute explanation?
You got noon?
Yeah.
I should be fine to make my lunch.
I gotta leave a note too, so we just will inform him of that right away. Until I saw that, I thought this will be
Sure.
a short meeting.
No such luck.
I'm sure Dave will just pick up the highlights.
Did you get the Drainage Association?
I would be the one.
We want to take action on salary appointments prior to the.
I'd make a motion to.
I'll second that.
Mr. Jones, support from Mr. Helmers, approve the salary appointments as presented. Any further discussion, comments? All those in favor signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Alright. We'll pass 9:15. If you'd like to join us, and
Thank you.
I have a Drainage Association, and
Well, it's a hot seat here.
Yeah. Step on up.
Good morning. Good morning. John Corbett with the Iowa Drainage District Association. I think as you all know, I try to make it a practice to get out and personally visit with our member counties once a year, and this is your lucky day. This is one of the county's days. So I'll talk about three different issues. First of all, judicial issue. There has been another lawsuit filed over water quality. The good news is that we're not involved, directly anyway. This is a lawsuit filed by Citizens for Community Improvement and another group that I have not heard of, but apparently is sort of an offshoot of groups that were organized around opposition to the Dakota Access Pipeline. And they have filed suit against DNR and IDALS, basically alleging that those two agencies are not doing enough to protect clean water. First of all, I think lawsuits are a horrible way to make policy, but unfortunately that's the world that we live in. And one of the reasons that the Moines Water Works lost the lawsuit that they filed against drainage districts, probably the principal reason, when the judge dismissed the suit, he said, you know, one of the questions I have to ask in looking at this lawsuit is, do supervisors acting as drainage trustees have the authority to do the things that the lawsuit wants you to do? And his answer to that was no. So, you know, drainage district trustees don't have the power to regulate. They don't have the power to tell a farmer or a landowner what practices to put on their land. They don't have the power to tell them how to run their farming operation. And he said, drainage districts are statutory creatures. You're created by law, and you can only do those things that the law legally permits you to do. Now, you all as county supervisors have home rule given to you by the Constitution. And what that means is that if state law is silent on an issue, you do have generally the ability to take action in that area. if you're not prohibited from doing so. As drainage trustees, that is not the case. You do not have this silent grant of authority. As a matter of fact, really all the drainage statute says, and it's sort of, it's in the middle of a paragraph, and if you read the paragraph quickly, you'll miss it. But about halfway through the statute, in the middle of the paragraph, is a sentence: the drainage trustees have the authority to spend money on behalf of the district. That's about it. Doesn't define, or for the benefit of the district, and it doesn't define what benefit is. So that's open to interpretation. Matter of fact, you know, we had an issue several years ago where I was contacted by a district that had elected trustees, one of the few districts in the state that still had elected trustees, and they wanted to know whether they could purchase insurance. These drainage district funds to purchase insurance to cover the district. Because there's nothing in the law that says they can or can't. And our advice to them was, you know, you can probably make a pretty strong case that that's for the benefit of the district, so it's probably okay for you to do that, but be aware that you could be challenged. So this new lawsuit, with the caveat that that's a bad way to do business, I think if you're gonna sue somebody, at least sue the people that can do something about it. You know, the lawsuit in the first place should have been filed against the regulators. If you really want to change regulation, then you sue the regulators. We have ongoing issues with this protection for this, what's called this Topeka shiner, which is this little silver fish. And if you have Topeka shiner habitat, there are certain things that you can't do on that land. And all of that Topeka shiner stuff is as a result of a lawsuit, a federal lawsuit, filed against the EPA. And the courts came out and said, you need to do more. So all these new regulations were enacted to protect the Topeka shiner. So drainage districts are not directly involved in that suit, but depending on where the judge decides to take it, we could potentially be brought in terms of the solution to the lawsuit. So we'll be watching that very closely, and if we need to get ourselves involved, we will do so. Second thing I'll talk about is state legislature. If you know, the legislature has been adjourned for the year now for a couple of weeks, which is always sort of a relief to have them home. And frankly, with respect to drainage, it was a pretty quiet year, and after so many years we've had, that was a good thing. I guess the big question for the legislature remains as to when they're going to do the 3/8 sales tax for conservation, which is known as the Iowa Water Land Legacy Fund. This has been in the news for a long time, and we have a provision in the Constitution which says the next time sales tax goes up 3/8 cents, or any amount greater than 3/8 cents will be devoted to conservation programs. We heard 2 years ago, it'll be next year. We have heard 1 year ago, it'll be next year. We're hearing this year, it'll be next year. And what they're telling us now is that they're going to look at it next year in conjunction with an overall tax reform package. So I'm guessing what they want to do is they want to package this together with some sort of another tax decrease, so at least on the surface they can make it look like it's revenue neutral. Couple of things with regard to the sales tax and the Water Land Legacy Fund. First of all, the first issue they have to confront is the distribution of the money, because the distribution is controlled by statute. The distribution is not controlled by the Constitution. So you have some legislators who have been there a while, that were there when the distribution formula was put in place, that basically take the position that, you know, there's a lot of work that went, a lot of work and a lot of compromise that went into that distribution formula, we shouldn't change a word. And there's other legislators that are newer to the process that weren't there when those decisions were made that said, we would like to see some changes. That formula was I'm not gonna vote for a 3/8-cent sales tax increase unless we make changes in that formula. And then you get sort of a third hardline group that says, if you make any changes, I'm not gonna vote for the sales tax increase. So you've got that dynamic at play. And, there will be discussions this summer on the distribution formula, and we'll take those discussions. The second issue that brings up is you're probably not gonna see a 3/8-cent sales tax increase, you're probably gonna see a 1-cent sales tax increase. So that leaves 5/8 of that, open for discussion. And, that's a lot of money, and you've got 50 senators and 100 representatives and the governor's office, which all might have slightly different ideas on the best way to spend that money. So that's going to have to be at least somewhat resolved before they sail into those waters. You know, it's not a matter of if this sales tax increase is going to happen, it's a matter of when. Conventional wisdom, although we were told it will be next year, conventional wisdom says it won't be next year because it's an election year, and generally tax increases in the legislature don't happen in election years, but, you know, we're in strange political times. You know, stranger things have happened, so never say never. So we'll be watching that. And last thing I want to talk about is waters of the United States and where we are with respect to that. And waters of the United States, to give you some history, so we're in the Obama administration, and what federal regulation says is that EPA has the ability to regulate navigable waters. And navigable is the really key word there. Because if you can't navigate in it, if you can't put a boat in it and go somewhere, EPA doesn't have the ability to regulate that body of water. So that's where we started out. Obama administration comes in, and EPA under the Obama administration changes the rule, and the net impact is to take the word navigable out. So that potentially says that EPA can regulate anything that they want to that's wet, including drainage districts and farm ponds and whatever they want to do. So that rule was put into effect. It was immediately challenged in court. And federal district court stayed the implementation of the rule, but it was district court, so that stay was not a national stay, it just impacted certain states. So the situation we've had for several years is that the rule has been enforced in some states and not enforced in other states. And Iowa is one of the states where it wasn't enforced. So that brings us to the Trump administration coming into office. And one of the first things the Trump administration does with a new EPA director is we're going to take the rule back to the old way. And we're going to put the word navigable back in and return the situation to where it was. Well, that's not as easy as signing a document and making it happen. You've got to go through a whole rulemaking process to get that reversed. So that was in process, which is well and good. The second thing that the new EPA said was that we need a new rule to replace the old rule because of some Supreme Court decisions that set some precedent that we don't like. So we need a new rule to clarify exactly what authority EPA has. So that new rule was issued in January of this year. And frankly, I thought going in the drainage districts would be okay. Under, you know, a federal administration that generally does not like regulation, I thought we would be pretty safe, and I turned out I was wrong. And I spent a lot of time on, more time than I wanted to spend on it this winter, I can guarantee you, many meetings. And basically where we are on this is that if you read the rule in certain parts, you can make the case that drainage districts should be NR exempt. And you read the rule in other parts, and you can certainly make the case that we aren't exempt. So the rule is very clear. And I have talked to attorneys who are experts on this rule who agree, who said, you know, this does not create a good situation because it's not clear whether drainage districts are covered. So while the stated intent was when they wrote this new rule, they said, here's what we're trying to do. We want to make this clear so everybody can know by reading the rule whether you have to get a Clean Water Act permit or not. You should know if you're covered when you read this rule. And as drainage districts, we don't know. And that essentially puts us into sort of a never-never land, where that potentially any project that you do, there's going to be another process that has to take place, probably by the engineer who's running the project. And the question asked, does this need a Clean Water Act permit? And that's going to be a call to the Corps of Engineers. And somebody from the Corps is going to have to answer the question and possibly come over and look at the plans and look at the project to make a determination whether a Clean Water Act permit is needed. This is not a good scenario in terms of time and in terms of cost. So what IDEA has proposed and did in our comments to the rule was that it would be made very clear in the rule that drainage districts are exempt from the coverage. Now, I can say that I'm happy to say that we have very strong partners at the state level. The Governor's Office and Department of Agriculture, Department of Natural Resources, we have good working relationships with all those offices. There was an effort put together for those three offices to write their own comment letter. Excuse me, I thought I turned that on. There was an effort by those three offices to write their own comments to the open comment period by EPA, and they did so. And those went out under the signature of the governor, which is a good thing. From what I understand, EPA has received 700,000 plus comments on the rule. They say they read all of them. I don't know.
How are other states lining up on that stance? We have a strong coalition of states.
I don't know. I didn't have an answer to that because I could read those comments, but but I will say that the governor, in her letter, supported by the DOT, supported by NDOT, supported by DNR, echoed our concerns about drainage districts. And I am not certain that IDEA's comments that we made would be read, but I'm pretty certain that the governor's comments are going to be read by EPA looking to enforce the rule. The second thing, which was sort of lucky, I guess, is I went to a meeting several weeks ago where there was an official from federal EPA from Washington, D.C., who I know. I've met her at this meeting in the past, and I happened to sit next to her at lunch. And she was on the agenda after lunch to talk about the rule. And I pulled up our comments on my computer and had her read them. And she said, this is really good stuff. Send me a personal copy of these comments, because this is very helpful. And she's on the group that is actually going to write the response to the new rule. So we have some advocates on our behalf, and I hope that we do have an impact. And, you know, this isn't going to happen tomorrow. EPA has to review the comments, then they publish the final rule, and then they approve it again, as they will, no matter what they do. And, of course, the other possibility exists that we could have a new administration at the next election, and a new administration comes in and decides to reverse everything again and start over. So this is not going to be something that happens tomorrow. But nonetheless, it is a concern that needs watching, and we will do so. So, happy to answer any questions.
How were they gonna originally divvy up that 3/8 of the sub?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
How were they originally going to divvy up that 3/8 of the sub?
I don't have that in front of me, I can email that, to you.
Okay.
You know, there's some concerns that, you know, we're not doing enough for parks, we're not doing enough for water, I mean, you name it. There's gonna be people that are not happy with the distribution formula. I don't think I have that. No. It's in my files at home, but I can send
The
it.
people that have the issues with it is because it's not going to one place versus another, more for water quality versus parks, or,
You have people all over the board. And you have water quality advocates to say, you know, this is good, but there should be more. You have, for example, conservation directors that probably would have a different idea. You've got conservation districts, which might have a different idea in terms of how that money should be distributed. So there's a lot of opinions on it.
I would imagine that the latest story here, the last couple of weeks ago with the amount of manure per square miles is probably gonna push some people one direction or another.
Yeah, potentially it could. Yeah, I don't really want to comment any further on that, but potentially it could.
Anything else, John? Thank you for your time.
Okay? I will,
And the district.
I will get that formula out, and I'll send it, who should I send that to?
It's me,
Okay,
no,
yeah, I should be able to get that to you tomorrow.
okay.
Okay, great. Great, thank you all.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Jump back up, we've got a solutions contract to consider.
Is that the same, essentially?
Yeah, it is,
I'll make a motion to approve that contract. Support.
Contract with solutions, with a motion to approve by Mr. Jones, support from Mr. Schulte. Further discussion, comments? All those in favor of the contract, signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay. Resolution 46 in front of us, for fiscal year 19-20 budget appropriation.
Motion resolution 46/18/19.
Approval of resolution 46 from Mr. Schulte, support from Mr. Jones. Comments or discussion concerning resolution 46, fiscal year 19-20 budget appropriation? None. Mr. Schulte, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Jones? Aye. Mr. Helmers?
Aye.
Mr. Boer? Aye. dismiss that, but I don't know that I want to act as a lending institution. I can seek other financing and borrowing and pay those off and have better rates. I guess would be my stance. I'm not trying to make it difficult, but I would consider some movement, but I don't know that something drastic or try to compete with current rates or anything like that. It's just my thoughts.
How long has it been at that?
Just the last couple of years, it's been at 6 for a long time, and then a couple of years ago, I think we went to 6.5. It had been at 6 for, prior to that for a long time.
What are some of our neighboring counties charging?
I don't, for Bryan County, 5.5 maybe. Lyon County, Lyon County don't have drainage. Bryan County, I don't know what Cherokee does, the bigger counties. What they charge there.
Cause we got a couple of joint ones with them, I don't know, maybe you knew what they were.
Yeah, I don't know what they're charging. And that stands, cause like, if they're stand warrants, they have to, I think Dickinson has to do what we follow 6.5. Cause they collect money. Becky, one day is supposed to be money to Becky.
Remember, how was that determined when it joined the district?
It's kind of what side the work's in.
I know, the joint meeting, that both boards have to approve the assessment, and then both boards have to approve it, and then we go from there. Usually our board sets it, and then Dickinson County follows suit on our suggestion. Or work. We understand one from that.
We're facing with O'Brien County.
No, because you have
I'm
no
not sure
say.
how that determined.
I don't think you
Well,
can
that's not a
say,
joint.
it's not a joint.
No, that's not a joint district, it's not the same.
Here they tell us we have to go.
Would Becky know what the neighboring?
I can ask her.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
I tend to agree with you, Jason, I'd rather just be a little higher, say, someplace else and borrow the money.
Like we said, in today, they thought O'Brien County was 5 and Dickinson was 6, so they're gonna call us, no, for sure.
So we're in the neighborhood.
Wait for that information, or? Proceed?
What's up?
Any thoughts?
Oh, I actually thought maybe go to 6, but, I don't know.
It doesn't bother me either.
What's up? I'm not even, we're a little on the high side probably compared to the rest of the counties.
Make the motion, I'll second it.
I'll make the motion for 6.
Support.
We have a motion and support to make to set the rate at 6% for standing warrants. That would apply waivers to them. Further discussion, favor of that motion, signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Just past 9:45, insurance coverage on volunteers, I think, there. You guys here for insurance coverage on volunteers? That's exciting topic. Oh, yeah.
This topic is a real snoozer. Hey. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, a couple weeks ago, we had a fair board meeting, and we addressed the issue about those guys that work out there, they're actually volunteers. I'm gonna have Brian hand these out, just to kind of brief you how it kind of works. I didn't want to come here. Did I? No, he suggested that I show up, so.
Yeah.
Just to brief you guys on basically how it works. When I got that first page, it's called non-statutory volunteer coverage through IMWCA, okay? And we put some of those last year on the county's policy. Now, I do have a packet here for Michelle. Oh, yeah, this is your packet's a little bit bigger. Because there's some more information, because there's an actual application for volunteers that, work for the county or help with the county, and we would like to know exactly who those are. IMWCA would like to identify who those individuals are. So, before, let's see, we talked about some volunteers who are gonna be cutting the trail, mowing the trail.
Possibly, yeah.
Possibly, if you get those, then we need to know who they are, and then they would be covered under the IMWCA policy, because they're under the direct orders of the county. Now, the big difference is now we move on to the fair board, okay? That's a separate entity, it's that 28E that we talked about last time we were here. Okay, that's completely separate. That's not under the county's direction, so that's exempt from being on the IMWCA volunteer. So what we did is we went to work and we found on the next page a company, and this was suggested by IMWCA, it's called CIMA for volunteer insurance. And we were able to get some coverage. It's probably mostly excess coverage, but it is coverage for the volunteers that work at the fair. And I'm hoping that Jerry, that we get a list of who all the volunteers are before the fair actually starts.
Yep.
And if we can do that, now, right now, that they picked 23 people that would probably be volunteers working at the fair. You know, there's all kinds of dangers out there. And who knows if someone will get hurt while they're volunteering, but there's some coverage there. And it costs $341 a year to insure all those people under this program. And that second page, it kind of hits the highlight. It's excess accidental medical coverage up to $50,000. And then there's also coverage up to $50 for repair, replacement of glasses. You know, some of the things that happen. But there's excess volunteer liability coverage. If a volunteer does something with he or she, her vehicle, they'll still come after the county, but they have some excess. So it's really a pretty good deal. And at the fair board meeting, it was kind of considered a no-brainer, wasn't it, Jerry?
Yep.
Okay. So they went ahead and executed, got that policy, we got that policy enforced. But the other thing I wanted to highlight about is I was thinking, how about EMA? Well, E911, those guys are all volunteers also, they're board members, but they volunteer, correct? I mean, if there's an emergency management, emergency or whatever, yeah, they're gonna be out and about doing some stuff. So, is that something you'd like to
This is
see?
not gonna usually be through community fire department or something like that, so we aren't talking a county.
Okay, so that's a little different,
I
okay.
would like,
Yeah, but is the EMS separate from the fire department?
EMS is part of the county, so they're okay as far as the ambulance service.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're good there, because everything's regulated by the county.
That's how we get the fire department showing up. Or a representative. Yes.
Yeah, you have different members.
But is that covered through the fire?
I don't know, I'm not sure, that's why I'm here to ask.
I'm on the fire department too, I guess, I don't know.
Right. So that's it, would we need to check in on that at your next meeting? Then the E911, you know, those guys, there's not much there, I know, but
Yeah, just talk to Dan and see what our next meeting is.
Okay.
All right?
I just told Bill that probably something being, we weren't aware of all this. Maybe
Right.
there's other entities that are.
Yeah,
are
and
aware
it's,
too.
yeah, we're just here for awareness purposes, you know, if we expose, something out there that needs some coverage, that's why we're here. And like I said, this stuff is reasonable. It's,
I don't,
go ahead.
sorry,
Go ahead, Jim, you got
I
it.
disagree with the reasonable aspect of it, and I understand that
Yep.
they have a separate governing board, but you make the comment that something happens, they have this little coverage, they're still gonna come back to the county, well then, isn't that saying, we're in charge, why aren't we covered?
I know what you're saying, they're still gonna list it. So like, let's just say if I'm a volunteer, I'm out there with my personal vehicle and volunteer for the airport. Somebody gets hurt, they're gonna list everybody, they'll end up throwing me out. You know, so my personal liability is gonna be on it, but I was a volunteer for the airport's gonna be on it. They're gonna list the county because it's part of the Osceola County, then they just, you know, when they get down to the nitty gritty, they throw them out, so.
Is that the same scenario then for conservation volunteers?
Yes, it would be. But the conservation on this one is, that's all controlled by the county. So that would be one of the volunteers that would fall under.
But they have their own board that makes their own rules.
Is it a 2080?
No, it's a separate governing board that operates.
But is it a 2080 agreement on the county?
I don't think so.
Set up by statute.
Okay, by the county.
But then still within the county.
Yeah, so then that would be under the county umbrella.
So we don't have to have this separate.
You wouldn't have to have that separate one, because then that would be one of the volunteers that would put in that list for my WCA. So there again, like, as an idea, Jerry, if you have a volunteer and say, well, we put you under the, conservation department, they'll tell you when to mow and do all that stuff. They'll actually be the ones giving the orders, then that would probably fall under the IMWCA, rather than this, that CIMA package.
But every time a new volunteer joins the force, then it's another $10.
Yes, and then we just have Rochelle get that list. And we hope nothing happens, you know, as long as nothing happens, we're good.
We kinda did it on the fair board, we got some young
Yes.
people with families, and they're concerned with what happens if you do
Yes.
something happens to us. We went ahead and did it.
But on that CIMA, I mean, it's $4.25 per volunteer for accident policy. For the volunteer liability, it's $2.05. For the excess auto liability, it's $7.45. But it comes with a minimum premium of $100, that's why we got to the $341, so. And the guys at the fairport thought it was kind of a no-brainer that maybe we should do this. I don't hear anybody snoring yet. Anybody got any other questions? Then you want me to contact Dan?
Yes.
Okay. Does that clear up a lot of questions, or does it make more questions? That's the question here.
I'm back to, you maybe answered this before, what about like our cemetery, and the guys that mow?
That is a contracted thing, you know, like with Red Ackerman, you know, doesn't he do that? And that's a contracted thing, right?
Yep, but do they provide proof of insurance then?
They should be providing proof of insurance.
Rochelle?
To us, or
Yes.
to township clerk?
To the township clerk.
I don't know, hopefully,
Yes.
I should check into that, I don't know.
I'm guessing, like for Melvin, I'm guessing there's any,
Right.
so then who's liable for that? If they get hurt out there, who's liable?
Technically, they are, because that is a contract that you have with them.
No, but if they don't have one,
Well, then they're gonna, you know, they're gonna go somewhere.
yeah.
Yeah.
But our contract would say they should have provided it.
Right.
So they're saying.
They're gonna be in trouble, but they'll, you know, I would give just, not to talk out of school, guys electrocuted there by the city, okay? They're going after the city. City didn't even know the guy was gonna be up there. We have a contractor that doesn't have any insurance. We have a contractor that doesn't have any workers' comp insurance. Sends the guy up there without any safety equipment, now they're coming after the city. You know, is there defense coverage here for them? Yes. But, I mean, that's just how crazy things get. They're gonna go and try to find somebody to pay them. So, go ahead.
Sorry, what happens to the townships then if they own their own lawnmower and somebody
That's my question.
Well, 'cause I know we have that.
Yeah, that's my
That was
question.
not a contract.
Right, then when you're contracted, then they might fall under this volunteer thing, but even though you're paying them some. Let me find out on that, let me find out from my MWCA.
Well, I know like Baker, they own their own lawnmower, they hire a guy,
Right.
so he has to get underneath this policy.
Right, yeah, either that or he should show proof that he has insurance to do this.
But he runs the townships and lawnmower.
It was the same scenario we had going on at the fairgrounds.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, because in that scenario, I don't think him providing his own insurance is really as much more concern.
No.
It's really more that he be covered under our policy.
Yes.
as opposed to providing his own.
For the workers' comp, then the more.
So is he gonna have to be paid by, just like,
It's something to consider, but in the meantime, if he can show proof of insurance, that he's, that he has insurance to do that.
who does like May Cities?
Township trustees just put a bid in for it.
So if they put a bid in, then they have to provide proof of insurance.
Yes, they should.
To provide their own equipment.
I don't know that that's.
You'd want to provide their own.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, I think as long as we provide equipment, then we're liable.
Well, you're subject to it because then you're supposed to be going through the safety procedures on how to use your equipment.
If they're at the point of providing their own equipment, sure, they can provide their own insurance, but I prefer that they be under our policy. Just going back to that whole idea of, it's not what we say the employment arrangement is or the volunteer arrangement is. It's what the structure of it indicates. I think that them being under the policy is much more preferable if we're gonna be providing equipment and the township's providing equipment.
So, go ahead, Rochelle.
So, I mean, the county doesn't pay for the mowing, the township
The
pays.
townships do.
So then if that's a scenario like the fair board, is the county's gonna have to start paying that?
Well, what we did, the one that happened with the county is they were actually paying. I mean, that was, but they are paying the township, so that's what I need to ask Andrew at IMWCA. And there again, it's one of those, as long as nothing happens, you're not gonna have a problem. Something happens, whatever not.
The townships are using their own levy money. They're not getting that from the county. They set their own levy for their costs.
So this should probably get their own. When I hear that.
Because we're not paying them.
Fair board isn't levying entity,
No.
the township.
Right,
Has
yeah.
the source to.
Is it gonna maybe raise the cost? Probably, but what it does is it secures it, so you guys don't get stuck with these injury problems that if something does happen, or accident.
It's just about getting to the point where they should all be like Cindy now, just contract it out, then only their own lawnmower, right?
Yep.
I would make everything a lot simpler.
It would be a lot easier. It really would. That kind of takes them away from somebody.
No,
I'm trying to just protect your interest.
Yes.
Yeah. There's legitimate lawn care businesses, but
Yeah.
we should.
That's been talked about by the fair board, actually.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just a good idea that since we're having this conversation about multiple townships, to have some conversations about expectations for what these bids are gonna look like when these townships do it.
Yes.
So we don't get into situations where township boards say, well, we just put it together, and, well, we just put it together is a very specific contract proposal that sounds like supervisory authority, and also says, oh, you can use our lawnmower, we'd like to see your insurance. That's a mishmash, that's, you just grab it all together, and then it's, you leave a court to look at that and figure out what the employment status is. They're gonna go and say that person is an employee 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
So, if we're gonna go to the point where we're gonna actually have these people be independent contractors, let's make sure that it's consistent across townships.
Yep, so totally agree with that. Yep, totally agree with it.
So should we have a township meeting then with all the clerks and all the supervisors to discuss all this, or, cause I
That was
really
just
don't
what I was
know.
gonna ask you, how to proceed with this, I mean, that'd be your call. And if you need to, like to show up, we can have no one show up too, however you guys would like to.
You gotta get everybody on the same page.
Yeah. You'll be communicating with me?
I will be.
She communicates all the time.
What do you like?
Well, I heard,
It's fine.
the last gentleman that was here, he had a suit and tie on.
Yes. that what you want next time? I can
He's gonna
definitely
say that, he's gonna say that to you.
I can definitely wear a suit tie. I'm gonna make my form. Any other questions?
It's not what you said before, you can put lipstick on a pig.
Yeah, that's still fun. You know, but I wasn't talking about me.
Oh, I don't know, I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
Something that came.
Yeah, he's really good at remembering stuff like that. Right. Any other questions?
Thank you, Bill.
No, thank you guys, appreciate it. See you guys.
Right.
Right, see ya.
Have a good one.
I need to talk to you sometime about crime stuff, what's going on.
Oh, yeah, that's funny. Come on up and talk to your sheriff. I think I know the police.
No, you didn't want to hear it.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna just watch it.
Oh, gosh.
Check 45, yeah.
ATVs on the road.
It's short. And give it all the tours that they have out there.
Yeah, if they got on control.
Yeah.
I know.
Oh, I really like Dickinson's, short, sweet, to the point. And some of these other ones got a lot of ifs, ands, or buts, and there's, these side-by-sides and four-wheelers are, they're all over the story. You know, and several of them say something about, you know, soft-sided tires. Well, I don't know, there's a lot of them that don't have soft-sided tires, so. That's just my opinion, I like Dickinson's short, sweet. Maybe that's not right, that's the way I.
Sorry, what are you guys talking about?
The ATV.
Oh, okay, yeah, so we only got about 15 minutes here, but that's just a whole, there's a lot of things going on here.
I'm going in, I see that it is, I mentioned it before, ISAC's annual conference in August. Got a breakout session for supervisors, joint with engineers, I believe. I guess I would be in favor of waiting till after that, getting feedback from other counties and addressing, or seeing what's offered there. So with that being said, it's on today's agenda.
So I think that's a really good idea, just because of what we're talking about, what we're considering here. I went ahead and looked through various counties ordinances here, a lot of ones from around here, several from places like Wright, Shelby, Clinton County, across the state. Trying to stay with more rural counties, I don't even know what Polk County looks like, I know what the status of that is in the bigger counties, but that's not really the point. When I came here today, I guess my thought process was you guys had to make two decisions, or two sets of decisions. One is, do you want such an ordinance, do you want to allow those things? And two, what form that ordinance should take. I think Jason has a good idea in tabling this discussion until they go in August, until he gets to talk to a bunch of different folks. I don't necessarily have to, I think that's a good idea. What I would say is the drawback of that is that then you have to wait out the majority of the summer season when people are going to want to be using these. Now, my personal opinions on this are colored by situations in which people went ahead and disobeyed the rules and went ahead and rode the ATVs anyway, and got hurt, or got arrested, or got in trouble. So, the point is, you know, we talk about making rules that people are gonna follow. People are already not really following our rules with ATVs. We might have to wait this summer to have a better set of rules that they might be more inclined to follow. That's the drawback. The upside is that this is a problem across the 99 counties. Whether you're talking about our county, or the ones next door, or the ones down in the bigger counties of the state. There are rural areas, even the biggest counties of the state, it's a statewide issue, everybody's talking about it. It wouldn't be bad to hear what other counties have to say about this, besides what they've just said in their ordinances, or what we've heard from other county officials. So, with that being said, I do have kind of a basic draft ordinance, I think Rochelle circulated to you guys. And again, here we go.
Stated earlier that the simplicity of Dickinson County's resolution was of interest.
Right.
There, anything you would address concerning going with a simple approach like that versus
You should
what
copy
you provided?
in front of you there. Okay. few things with the Dickinson County ordinance that I think they're pointing out. One of those is that we don't have a definition of what an off-road use vehicle is, off-road utility vehicle is, ATV. They do acknowledge in sections of the Iowa code that permit that. However, although those sections of the code or sections near those define what an ATV or UHV is, we could run into an enforcement problem if we just adopt this ordinance as it is. I think that there's some sections in the ordinance that I put together, as well as sections of other ordinances that better define that. Second of all, I think that the ordinance just stating the allowance of operating these vehicles is fine, but when you get down to the third whereas there, where it says safely operated on all such roadways, with the exception of level C roadways, without interfering or causing undue hazard, that's a very broad allowance perspective, okay? And Aaron has a lot more opinions on where these things should be allowed and where they shouldn't be. If you guys are going to agree, then determining that off-road utility vehicles and all-terrain vehicles can be safely operated on all such roadways with the exception of level C roadways. Okay, that's going to be an issue, I think, for Aaron, and I think that's an issue for me, just from a safety perspective. I think that there needs to be some detailed discussion as to where we would and wouldn't allow these. Also, there's no statement in here about an exception for agricultural vehicles. I know that that's in the vast majority of the ordinances that I reviewed. Aaron and I talked about that. That is an exception in the code explicitly, but here's the thing, when you make ordinances, you're making a local county rule. If it references Iowa code, the odds are that when a court construes that statute, they're going to default to what the Iowa code is. So if you're comfortable with having just the straight up exception in the Iowa code, as is referenced in the one I put together, that's fine, but if you want to more closely define it, if you want to define it specifically, I think that would be a good idea. Now, there's also something, there's nothing stated in here at all about hours of operation, okay? I don't have a problem with having a short 2-page ordinance. I think mine is just about 2 pages of text. Yeah, it's exactly 2 pages of text. We don't need to go have Sioux County's ordinance, okay? Sioux County's ordinance is fair. It's 4 pages long. It divides ATVs and UHVs into 3 different classes, and then doesn't treat the vehicles differently based on classes. It is an incredibly comprehensive ordinance. It gives police powers to enforce the ATV allowance on those roads as they see fit based on a reasonable, safe operation, okay? Sioux County ordinance gives the cops a wide berth to enforce safe driving of UHVs, ATVs, whatever you want to call them, and arguably puts too much of a burden on local law enforcement. Obviously, we have different law enforcement realities than Sioux County does on a lot of different levels. Again, those are just some issues that I see just looking at it. I think that there's a lot more meat that needs to be put into it. There's also no penalty written in here for unlawful operation. A third thing is highway crossings. I believe I saw that in Sioux County's ordinances. I'll have to check as to whether or not I made it in here as explicitly stating it, but when I talked to Dickinson County Sheriff, he noted that in effect there's 3 stated allowed crossings whereby ATVs, UHVs can cross Highway 9 or Highway 71. In practice, however, it sounds like as long as people are crossing safely, they don't enforce those rules. Neither does DNR, neither does Iowa State Patrol, neither does DOT. If you guys want to have designated crossings, we can talk about that. If you just want to leave it be where people can cross safely and smartly, we can leave that be too. And that can also be explicitly put into the ordinance. Right now, I have to check with DOT as to whether they have a preferred form for that or not, as to how that should be. But, you know, I think that Dickinson's just leaves a lot of questions out there. Can we have something that's still 2 pages and covers everything? I think so. But, you know, just holding this thing in my hand and looking at it, and the issues that come along with it, you know, kind of indicates that there's probably a lot of study that needs to be done on this issue. And again, I go back to the membership thing. You guys are making rules here. You're sitting here not as the people who hold the purse strings, you're sitting here as the local lawmakers, right? You have to think about making rules that people are going to follow. My experiences are already with people who don't follow this rule, right? Like people getting OWIs on these. people getting hurt on these, kids getting hurt on these. If we want to have an ordinance that addresses those issues, as well as just one ordinance could, I would suggest there could be some kind of licensing provision whereby somebody has to take an approved class if they're under 18, if they want to operate one, and perhaps a registration and a permit for other people as well, who are adults. What the fee for that is gonna be, your choice. I think Sioux County's fee is not insubstantial. $25. Okay, yeah, so I mean, in terms of how that's gonna work, you know, maybe the treasurer's office or the auditor's office has an opinion on that as well, but that's something else to take a look at and consider.
I certainly think registration fee would be good. I did get a call asking about maybe requiring like a flag or some sort of, not all of them would have daytime running lights
Right.
or taillights that are on, they have brake lights instead, but
Right.
visibility could be concerning during daytime hours.
Yeah, I
That may
agree.
be something to consider. Again, the example, I just question, or wonder why the weapons ban, isn't that shouldn't that be in violation or up against the concealed carry permit that we currently have in the state? Number 2.
Yeah, so that's something I can look into certainly, but I would imagine the authority for that comes from the authority of, well, so if you look at the state, you know, regulation, an ATV is kind of considered a hunting vehicle, right? Is it always a hunting vehicle? No, not really, we all know it's not. And that language, that idea comes from that statute, okay? Now, if you're on a state trail and you're not hunting, it's my understanding that you still have to follow these rules like in number 2 with weapons. Okay, I can look into that for you, but I don't believe that it's permissible to drive on a state trail with no hunting permit and no intent to hunt with an assault rifle slung over your shoulder.
No, but this seems to restrict even concealed carry.
Because if you got a concealed carry permit, you
You do.
probably still have that on your person going down the
Right.
street.
I guess that's what was coming to mind to me, is that it's restricted by.
And that can be changed as well. Let me see if I have.
Sioux County has that, you know, explained how that
language in there.
applies.
Yeah.
So I mean, they do require it to be cased and unloaded, but then they specify, you know, loaded.
You have to have a concealed carry.
Exactly, you know, the permit that's in place, yep, permit to carry, yeah.
I don't see where we have time today.
No, you don't. I mean, and this is kind of more informational thing anyway, so you guys couldn't pass one today anyways. So, I'm willing to, and I think the Sioux County ordinance actually contains an exception for concealed carry. And I think really, in all honesty, the purpose of that language that I included in there and included other ordinances was to prohibit the carrying of long guns while people are driving around in ATVs. Pistols, somebody wants to ride around with a pistol on their hip with an ATV, I don't see that nearly as being as much of an issue. I think that people with long guns carried on their persons driving ATVs is.
I don't disagree, I just, that word doesn't seem to be restricted in a way that
Yeah.
other laws permit.
But all the Aggies say it's the same, because it's already in the statute.
Yeah, I mean, essentially you're adopting the ag use statement in there. Here's my thing, again, you guys are making rules. A lot of people know if it's an ag purpose, it's exempt, right? But a lot of people don't know that, and a lot of people that know that ag use is exempt from a bunch of different areas of the state code, treat it like a blanket. Oh, it's ag use, so it's fine. Well, you know, depends. So I think that there's a benefit to explaining in the ordinance, this is what your ag use exemption is, as is stated in blah, 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 Iowa code. So, yep. I think that's probably about the time I have, so.
Proceed further with this, gentlemen, or other concerns, or things you'd like to see addressed?
So our table is until after you go have your August.
You're welcome to come too.
That was what my schedule looks like.
Mike probably shouldn't skip his daughter's wedding.
You know, big picture, I would recommend that actually. I'm not necessarily, I'm not gonna let my personal opinions on this, because I'm a public official, you know, for the county, as the county engineer. one thing about Sioux County is they have a lot of stuff in there, but I can also tell you this, they did, I can tell, the most research, and they got the most detail too when they actually put this together.
What's our population again?
I know, but I mean, what I'm getting at is they actually went through it very carefully, the engineer and all the sheriff, like, they actually got through all this stuff. On the flip side though, too, from an enforcement side, you know, what are we gonna enforce too?
Sioux County has.
I wonder if the classes might have to do too with their registration fees and all that too, I don't know how that works exactly. But I can tell you right now, by talking to the auditor there, they definitely put the most work into this, they went into the details and.
And they've got a larger population base.
They do, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we don't have that large group of people that we're trying to maintain
Yep.
order around.
Yep.
So it's like,
So some things that I have to say as a county engineer is that I don't necessarily design the roads for ATVs, you know what I mean? And so I can't like, you know.
I don't think that it's gonna
Yeah.
have any impact, because everybody's
Correct.
already doing what they wanna do anyway. All this basically is a guideline,
Yeah.
and now we would have the ability to enforce something if you had to, but we don't have anything on the books currently. You can't tell who's ag use and who's not.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an enforcement nightmare, you know, too, the Sioux County thing. You know, we have unified law enforcement, Sioux County has, either 2 or 3 city PDs.
Yep.
Maybe the classification was set up so that the cities could say, well, we only want class A and B ATVs on the roads during these times, and C, only during these other times, I don't know. And in terms of enforcement, you know, like I said before, you read the Sioux County ordinance, you see the word reasonable repeated in there, reasonable, safe operation, giving police wide powers. They have significantly more law enforcement resources there. In all honesty, this ordinance, if you guys pass it as I've drafted it, or as you want to change it around, is really only gonna get enforced when people are being annoying, or being a nuisance, or being dangerous, and the police are called. So.
Motion to table, or?
I'll make a motion to table.
I just want to say, I think we kill it for another year, if we do.
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen this year. I think we can get way too, all this stuff is way too complicated on how many wheels and tire pressure and pounds and all that. I think to me, that's ridiculous, to be honest.
Right, and again, those are quoting directly what's in the state code on ATVs, and if you just write that code number in there, what percentage of people are gonna go and look that up and know?
Yeah, but how are you ever gonna enforce something like that?
You only enforce it if you have to. And also, part of the reason that's in there is in case somebody gets into a serious injury or fatality accident because they're operating an ATV in wildly undangerous fashion, or wildly unsafe fashion, and then we have to assess liability later, or there's criminal liability to assess. And I realize that seems like a very remote possibility, but one of the very first decisions I made as county attorney was whether or not to charge the parents and children involved in an ATV accident in which a girl lost her arm up to her elbow because somebody was driving her in an ATV when they weren't supposed to. So these things later on, when we have problems, are useful to have the legality laid out in firm and clear fashion. That's kind of why that stuff's there. And again, you know, you can reference it.
Like I said, all my comment is we kill it for another year, so whatever.
Which is, you know, fair. There's support for the tabling, or there's still the ability to make a motion and act on it?
I don't know which one it is at this point. I don't need to go with.
There's a drafted one that has, it should be, say, ordinance XX at the top.
Yep, I got that one.
That's the one I drafted.
Motion to table this item by Mr. Jones, support by Mr. Schulte. Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
And we'll move down to the final administration report on DD number 43. Mr. Drexler, if you'd like to begin that, I'm going to step downstairs.
Okay, I'll get the report, Sam.
So do you need the resolutions for Tyler Avenue? Do you know anything on resolutions?
Yeah, so that's the ones I drafted as resolutions. Okay. You can call if you need me, but I'll be doing it next week.
The original.
Okay.
Hey, Rochelle, did those two things get updated in the resolution?
They did.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
They thought I had disappeared and wasn't coming back around.
What?
report is for the,
bringing lands that were outside of the assessed
but
boundary.
it's for the trustees of the drainage district, it's not for the county board of supervisors, correct?
Right.
That's how you got it laid out here, that's not a county issue.
Yeah, right, the board acting as trustees for Drainage District 43.
So currently we have our trustees have drainage
That's right.
43 on, and not our county board of
That is
supervisors. Have you heard much back on any of this?
So, yeah, to give you a little bit of background, you know, again, we're working with Drainage District 43, which is the outlet district below Drainage District 9. Drainage District 9, the improvement to the tile main was approved this past winter. We then had an informational meeting again in March with the Drainage District 43. At that, it was approved to go ahead, the board basically adopted, the following, meeting, a resolution necessity for annexation, which today we're filing the annexation report so that these lands are brought in and have the right of objection and remonstrance in evaluating if they want to proceed with an improvement down below on 43. We're running later than what we had planned in regard to getting this filed and then turn around and filing the official report on 43. We've been involved with FEMA evaluations for flood damages, Monona County and Buena Vista County, Monona, Woodbury, and Buena Vista counties. So we've had manpower tied up on that aspect. So I apologize for that, you know, this is a month later than what I was expecting to file for this. But, so what we will be doing here with this filing here is there will have to be a hearing date set 40 days out to, you know, only the people that are being annexed would be involved in that notice process. Bring them in. They do have the right to object to annexation, but they would have to prove that they do not drain to the facility of 43 to actually not be annexed. Because the fact that their water drains to that facility means they get some benefit from the use of that facility. So, this map here in the report basically shows these lands that are involved. In May, I was in the field and did an extensive boundary review. There was some lands that were shown in the district, down here in section 11, that we know, are actually draining out, or not draining into 43. We feel very comfortable about the, boundary that we got here in regard to lands that are, needing to be annexed into the district. The written report, portion of it is, just lays out that we've done a field evaluation that the board has, adopted. It was on April 9th that you adopted, the resolution necessity to, annex the lands. And our investigation found there's 232.6 acres of farmland and, acreages that, as well as 9.87 acres of land inside the city limits, there of Eldendorf, which drain to 43 that are not currently assessed to 43. Based on the information, it is recommended the board of supervisors consider annexation of these parcels. So in total aggregate, you're looking to annex 242.47 acres. And on the second page there, we lay out, tentatively approve this report, notify landowners to be annexed, and hold a public hearing with those landowners, and annex the overall land of 43 that are determined to be benefited. already been, you're planning to reclassify Drainage District 9 with the improvement. And again, Drainage District 9, all the lands in Drainage District 9 are part of DD 43. So, it's not a combined district, but this will be something that we will have to reconsider after 43 makes a decision about doing improvements down below on their own. It may make sense, instead of having two separate districts, once we get through the hearing process of 43, if they approve their improvement, we may want to move forward with combining the district and having one overall assessment, one overall district with the reclassification of both districts happening at that time. But if 43 would not do an improvement and they stay as their own, after we do annexation, we will have to classify these lands, and we would recommend that we go ahead and do a full reclassification of 43 and have that as a standalone, district and a new schedule for 43. So, just touching in regard to the things that come into play as we move through this, you did this similar thing last summer with DD 9. You went through annexation. We filed the engineer's report, I think July of 2018. You moved forward with annexation, and then we turned around and had the hearing on the improvement. So by doing the annexation up front, you're allowing the landowners the right of remonstrance. Otherwise, those lands that have not paid assessments in the district have no right of remonstrance or anything until they're officially annexed into the district. So today, looking for basically a tentative approval of the report and to set a hearing date on this report. I had it 40 days out. I think I forgot to print off that email, Michelle.
Yeah, August 6th, if you're not available, as soon as you can do it, the August 7th.
Yes, if you, the 6th, I would be tied up, but Wednesday on in that first week I would be available, or if you wanted to wait until the following Tuesday.
The last time we did annexation, we did it at one of the regular board meetings, and we usually do it separately. Any regular board meeting.
Is that how we handle nines annexation?
I don't remember that.
Yeah, I think we did actually, because it's only the landowners that are being annexed that are being notified, so I think we did do it in that fashion.
So just doing it on the 15th for their
And your regular
first
meeting,
meeting.
and then make that the last item of the day, and, have it, what do you typically go to in your normal?
I think we got it in the middle, we last time, so we'll have to identify a time, right?
You have to identify it, okay.
The other meeting. And then we can hold that as a separate meeting the same day, I guess. Yeah. Let me mark that day.
Sounds good. So 11 o'clock on August 13th. And that might, what I will plan to do then also, while we're discussing the hearing date, would be is to, prior to that, have time with the board to file the actual formal report. So if we wanted to set 10:30 or 10:45 we filed the actual engineer's report, we'd have the hearing on annexation, and we would be able to tell the people the date of the hearing on the engineer's report.
Do you think that'll take your?
The file the report, probably be worth if they have a half an hour time,
10:30 then?
10:30.
How does that work in the Elmhurst city limits, or there's two blocks or whatever that mark in on, what is it, they don't drain into that, or?
What we show there, yes, actually, there is a portion of the south portion of town does not actually drain into the district. So we are bringing in anything that actually officially drains over into the drainage way where the tile goes down through and actually surface outlets to the open ditch segment. There is a small channel on the south edge of town that actually takes water directly over DD 11 and does not go into the open ditch segment that the tile district outlets into.
If we annex them, and some of them aren't very big parcels, but how much would that be, do you think, for those?
Most of them will pay a minimum assessment of $5.
Okay, there's some, I know there's some land there now, really, I mean, we won't forget the taxes on it, to be honest with you, so I think.
It's more of a formality of the fact that they're in the watershed boundary, I mean, if we weren't annexing other ground, we would definitely not go after annexing just that ground.
It's recommended by Ivan, we would look to be tentatively approving the annexation report and setting a public hearing August 15th at 11 a.m. In that motion, and would that be the correct
Motion.
motion? Support by Mr. DeBoer. Further discussion? Comments, concerns? If we have a motion and support to tentatively accept the annexation report and set the public hearing time identified. All those in favor, signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign.
Okay. I do have to ask, has there been any petition on branch 2 of DD 9 filed?
Yes, I am aware of.
Okay, the Sonstergaard, property under his daughter's name, Melanie's. He had called to ask questions and stuff and wanted a copy of a petition that I emailed over to him. He was looking to petition on branch 2 for improvement, which basically serves Melanie's ground and one other landowner. And so, the biggest portion of the ground served is actually the Melanie's property. So, he knew what the steps were, and, basically, he indicated that he was planning to file a petition, and I was just curious if anything had been filed. In doing the main, we're not doing anything with the branch lines up there, and, it is possible as this thing moves through that you will, over the next years or whatever, get petitions to basically improve those branch laterals.
Like they need to go through the full report process too then?
They would, since there is a base report of the overall capacity, what we have to do, because those landowners, by separation into branch schedules, they are in a sense treated like a separate, district in a sense. So, yes, I mean, they have to be given the opportunity to go through public hearing and object, remonstrance, or whatever, if any, object if it's a repair, potentially remonstrance if it's an improvement. And the fact that, the main was so lacking in capacity, where we know that most of the laterals are also lacking significantly in capacity, so those will be things that'll be coming up over the next years as we get the main taken care of. So, okay, well, thank you. One other thing the other thing that we'll be doing is, so that the board's aware too, we will be sending out a letter in July to all the landowners in Drainage District 9 and 43 about wetland determinations. We still need those determinations moving forward in regard to potential impact of, farm wetlands in the watershed.
What if some farmer decides they don't wanna do that?
I think now that the improvement is done, and to get them through the NRCS, they only do them through the growing season, and they'll go up to, I think it's the end of October, so we'll be pushing for these determinations here through late summer and, fall. And we'll be asking 43 landowners even before, this letter will be out before they have a report, or the hearing on the report, we'll be asking them to get in and do the same thing, because, it's one way or the other, we're gonna have to clear the wetland issue also.
Doesn't it authorize the district to give that determination if the landowner doesn't?
We typically use that as power, if the landowner won't sign up for a wetland determination, the board would have to make the decision if you're gonna hire a third party to do a determination, because the board cannot request a determination through the NRCS. The landowner or his legal representative is the only people that can actually request that determination. But, going back to the updated wetland inventory maps, basically showed no wetland on the inventory map in the watershed. And that is reasonably, the upper end obviously is landlocked, but the, bottom, 60% of the watershed actually does have surface relief. So you would not expect that you're gonna find a lot of farm wetland in the watershed. Even though the tile system is inadequate capacity for good agricultural production, it is still, draws off the subsurface drain or water typically in less than 14 days. So you wouldn't expect that there's gonna be a lot of land that has the hydrology remaining, to be actually determined farm wetland. And that's what we had reported in our report, that we were not expecting significant acres of farm wetland in the watershed. And then the first step in that would always be, landowner can avoid impact by, as long as we're not traversing with the new improved tile system, they can orifice down their laterals off to any farm wetland and avoid impact if they need to do so. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Back up, and we're looking at resolution 47.
You just know the process it was before you said it.
Identify a few things I would like to see in only, basically. The ordinance we're referencing is engine noise reduction ordinance. It doesn't refer to engine braking, so I thought there was no need to have a resolution say engine braking. And personally, I would ask that we only do a half mile on the north mile, the southern half of the north mile. I don't know if there's any strong need to have an engine noise reduction ordinance as you approach Highway 9 from the south. As you approach that corner from the east to the west to the north, there's nothing, there's not any road close there. From south to CFD, you'd be within that half mile turning into the facility, so it would be enforced there. I guess that was just my thoughts. And talking with Aaron, after I mentioned this to Nolan, he wondered if we don't want to include a half mile going east from the intersection of 160th and Tyler. Right at that same area that we're looking at putting the four-way stop, and we've got trucks coming in on what is hard surface at that point from the east. Certainly a possibility that they would use excessive noise in approaching that intersection from the east as well.
On 822 or next?
No, it's just 160th, going out of Ochean, coming out of Ochean, you'll be at full speed anyway, approaching that four-way stop. Into Ochean from the east, you could be looking at higher speeds coming south, so. I would be interested in having that half mile to the east of the intersection of Tyler and 160th identified as well.
Like duck blocks.
Sorry, I think you've got much coming in from that side.
Blacktop, yeah. But that doesn't mean.
And if you can always do that, maybe, problem.
I think we could approve I motion to approve the resolution with that addition noted and.
You wanted to say that,
No, I didn't mention that to no one, he would not have included this. I spoke with Aaron about that downstairs. I would be interested in identifying that additional half mile.
This was resolution 47. I'll make a motion on resolution 47, 18, 19.
What does it look like?
This last. This one. The one that, yeah.
Does that, we got a motion from Schulte, support from Jones, does that include a half mile to the east of that intersection?
Yes, those are putting it up with me as well.
That was just one. Yeah, the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
I'm saying adding the half mile to the east of that intersection. traffic approaching it.
That's
What will likely be a new
what they
flow.
like to see. Let's stay with the half mile to the east.
On 160th.
Yep.
Okay, the language in the updated version, basically striking the engine braking wording and only doing a half mile north of 160th and Tyler, but also adding a half mile east of 160th and Tyler. Any further comments, questions?
Why are we taking it out, going north?
Up by the railroad, there's no one lives up there.
It's the north half of the north mile.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I can't.
Whatever.
So if they're coming into town from that direction, they can engine brake, even if it's by the elevator?
No, not by the elevator, just that north half.
If we don't designate the north half of the north mile,
Yeah. North half, there's the north half of that north mile, they can use it, brake.
well, what I'm saying, if they're coming in from the north, they can engine brake right by the elevator.
No.
That entrance is in the south half of the
That's from
line.
south half.
Whatever, I left it both ways, you got a motion? No, there needs to be an engine brake and an engine that goes over acres, but that's my thing.
With the motion and support, Mr. Schulte, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Jones? Mr. Helmers?
Nay.
Mr. DeBoer? I vote aye.
Okay, can you state that again, where this is located, please? This is the new, this is Tyler, and this is coming from the north, and so you're striking out the engine braking, just, excessive noise abatement, and you've
Here's-
also,
Here's what.
okay. Thank you.
We will add, it's adding 1/2 mile to the east
Yeah.
on 160th, basically past the blocks.
Oh, okay, actually, Troy will come out.
Well, behind this, you're coming to town, from Tyler's 160. It's over half a mile, it's Aaron or no one. So I'm just.
Can I have this information, we'll make a copy of it.
Or can you send you the updated one that, so we approved it with the change.
There.
Okay.
Have that change added.
Coming from the north,
Coming
she's
from the
already
north.
160.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can make copy of that.
Okay.
The elevator
I
is
will go.
probably close to half mile off that intersection. I'm just saying.
But then it would that may be the half of that north mile, right?
I think we should just pull road.
Resolution 48, do we want to further consider resolution 47, which received an affirmative vote, or are we ready to move on?
I'll go over the road.
It's on the agenda, we can reconsider. Resolution 48 is next listed. And I guess at this point, I'll ask you whether we, Mr. Rinaldo, if we just take care of the
Keep on
other
your agenda,
resolutions.
yes, keep on your agenda.
48 identifies the placement and location of stop signs on Tyler Avenue, effectively making it a four-way stop at 160th and Tyler.
I'll make that motion.
Motion from Mr. Helmers, Mr. DeBoer to make that intersection a four-way stop through this resolution. Any further comments or discussion? Hearing none, then Mr. Helmers, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. DeBoer? Mr. Jones?
$822.99. 45 on that, for both months, all the way.
This is 2 months. This is the whole 2 miles, right?
Yeah.
Motion for approval of resolution 49.
Support.
Support from Mr. Helmers. Further discussion on the speed limit resolution 49, Hearing none, Mr. Moore, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Helmers?
Aye.
Mr. Schulte?
Aye.
Mr. Jones? I vote aye. To be out of order, do we want to consider claims before we move into the audit report, or do we want to wait till after the audit report?
Do you think the other report's gonna be that long?
They want to do claims.
It probably be a good idea to do the claim, and take the some of the meetings.
Claim 2445 is about the water service claim.
We'll make a motion to approve that. 145.
Motion by Board, support from Jones, for Boston Water Service Claim 2445, I will abstain. Further discussion? All those in favor, signify with aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Abstain. Consider the remainder of the claims.
That's perfectly fine, and I need probably a timeline.
Shoot, it should have been 11.
I don't know how
11:15.
11:15. That would be good. Because I don't know how long it takes to get to front guard, so.
2 hours.
2 hours. I don't work on my time.
Make motion to claims.
Rochelle, what's the revenue tonight?
That's that basement of the court, of the
Right,
jail.
with the courthouse being part of it.
Jail basement.
They go to the jail, the courthouse, or?
It comes out of general basic, it's under courthouse, but specifically the jail, there's a specific line for that. It comes still out of the courthouse, but we have a line for the sheriff's office, and there. Jail.
The remainder of the claims, we have a motion from Schulte, with support from Jones. Further discussion?
Ernie says you can't tell difference though. You can tell difference in the basement.
Sorry, nice already.
Yeah, so
All those in favor of approval of the claims, signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. We are up to, or past, the 17-18 audit report. That will be done by 11:15. 11:15, all right.
Oh, yeah, I came to the auditor here a long time ago. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have the press release that you normally?
I do have that.
You should put the colors.
I know.
We do all.
We had a different color covers, and that one's with me with this one. Gray, I don't like gray.
Thank you so much.
This is what I think of that. Perfect. Not that we need to do it. Just did it, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, you've heard that clear, so yeah, now it's time to quick little grab something, because this is just the introductory. Well, thank you for letting me have the chance to come speak with you today. I will try to keep it to the time limit, because it is a gorgeous day outside. When the water is gone. What's that? When the water is gone. When the water's, oh, fair enough. Way over there. So, first of all, I have for you the audit communication. This is just meant to be, our communication with you as the supervisors in the auditor's office, since you guys are technically the management of the county as a whole. What we try to do is just kind of talk about what you're going to see in the audit report. We talk about some of the qualitative aspects of the different accounting practices that were used during the fiscal year in this report. We talk about the new standard that I'll wait to explain until there's more here on that.
Do you get new standards every year?
Unfortunately, yes. This year they decided on OPEB, that wonderful actuarial valuation of what it's costing the county today for people that will be on the plan when they're older, and it's going to cost more money in future years, so they can attribute the extra cost for this fiscal year rather than the future year when it does. They changed that this year so it was calculated more like IFRS. And so the county had to do a special actuarial evaluation. We had to restate all the financials. We had to come up with all new disclosures. So that is new, and that's what it talks about in this audit communication.
Can I just ask a question on that? Can any other business pay in diapers?
Only,
Say a hardware store?
no. No, it's limited to Iowa government
Okay, that's what I thought.
or their subdivisions like 28E, like the OCDC, theirs can, I don't believe any private.
Rural water systems can get it.
Oh, rural water maybe, and they're a nonprofit,
Yeah,
so.
nonprofits are eligible.
They are eligible as well?
Seasons can have.
Oh, seasons, that as well? Okay.
Yep. And like the Upper Des Moines has it.
But not any for-profit.
Not any for-profit, no. Like East, like Early Childhood Development, we have it as well. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, so
Okay.
government entities and nonprofits are eligible.
That answers my question.
Okay, that's a very good question. And so, kind of along those same lines with this new OPEB, what they're trying to do, just like I know you're getting the squeeze, where they're trying to make all the governmentals bigger and, you know, go to more regional sites, they're putting more and more pressure on us as auditors to minimize how much we assist with the audit report. Ideally, they are pushing for us to just walk in here, this is prepared, and we just tick mark it up. That is what they are trying to do. They basically want you to hire an auditor who looks at the books, and they want you to hire a separate accountant, basically, to write the audit report. That is the trend. Now, they backed off just slightly recently in the last month or so and saying, which Rochelle's going to really appreciate this, as long as the county has someone who is knowledgeable about the financials and what's in there, that's acceptable. You don't have to recreate the reports, but you got to be knowledgeable enough. So next year, we're going to be doing a lot of, Rochelle, this is what we did, this is how we came up with these numbers, does that make sense? If you don't have, if you have questions, what looks odd to you, as long as someone can sign off that they felt that they understood it enough to say, yeah, I understand what you're doing, no, maybe I can't prepare it, but that's good enough now. And that's kind of how they're temporary the change. So that's kind of the push as well. So in this report, we talk about the new OPEB. I was just explaining to everybody, OPEB has now been changed again. The new standards are in place. It's basically an actual aerial valuation, just like IFRS is. We talk about significant estimates, adjustments that had to be done, that there was no disagreements, that we will be having to do a management representation letter, that you didn't make us aware. If you ever decide to consult with another CPA firm, that's certainly fine, just let us know so we can understand what they informed you of in regards to a matter. And then we also talked about the different reports also in the audit. So, as I said, I'm going to try to get on the highlights, because I know we do want to keep on task, and I know this isn't overly exciting stuff, so I'm going to try to hit on the highlights. If you, afterwards, I can stay late for anybody who wants to talk with me afterwards, when others have to go, if they want to go over anything specific, I'm more than happy, or any later date, I'm always available to contact me, and we'll go over what you so choose. So on page 2, you have, first of all, we have the table of contents, and 1 and 2, we have the officials before and after calendar year 2018 is how we disclose those. We have our independent auditor's report. Here is where we go on to state that we feel the financial statements are fairly presented. So that's the important thing. We go on to talk about the new GASB 75 for OPEB that is implemented in this report. So if you look, so we had to do changes to beginning balances and rechange numbers and come up with all that in correlation with the auditor's office. We talked about the extras, the exhibits, then we talked about the notes, then we talked about the schedules, and then we talked about different findings. Starting on page 6 is management discussion and analysis. As I kind of always refer to this as the cliff notes for the audit report. This is going to give you the major highlights for the fiscal year for the major happenings of the county, and also the Public Safety Commission. It talks about how to use the report. It talks about what are the different funds of the county, explains the different fund structure. It talks about the public safety activity on page 9. Then we talked about the government-wide analysis. This is like the full accrual for the county. This is figuring in long-term debt, capital assets, the county as a whole, and we list that for both the county and for the Public Safety Commission. And we talked about the different changes, and that's why you're going to see in the 18 column on page 10, does not say, is just the actual figures, and then 17 was not restated for those changes. So you're going to see, when you reference some different changes, you're going to see that they may not tie to those numbers, because those are last year's numbers not restated for the change. Then we get in on page 12 is to the major fund highlights. The major funds are, we give a separate opinion on each individual fund there, and those are listed on Exhibit C and Exhibit E, and specifically, and so we talk about what for each of those major funds, which are basically any fund that you as a board want to be considered a major fund, will audit as a separate component or opinion unit. and also those that have basically over 5% of different revenues, expenditures, the ending fund balance, those sort of natures, revenue, assets, liabilities. So it's the ones with the most dollars or ones you feel are critical to the county as a whole. So it talks about those different changes and let's just what changed and what were some of the highlights for the year. We explained on page 14 in the top of 15 the budgetary highlights. You amended your budget twice during the fiscal year, and it basically explains what the reasonings for those amendments were and what the ending results were on the top of 15 from those amendments compared to actual. On page 15, we give you some details of what were the capital asset acquisitions or additions during the fiscal year, including a bequest that you received of some farmland, the Tyler Avenue project, and other assets that were bought for the county and public safety, and then also talks about the depreciation expense and what the values were at the end of the year at historical cost. Then on page 16, the top of 17, we list the long-term debt of the county. New during fiscal year 17-18 was the additional general obligation urban renewal bonds. We do show that you paid off your Osceola Electric Co-op obligation loan and also the capital installment purchase on that for the Kubota track loader through conservation was also paid off during the year. And I realize in the current fiscal year, you paid off the OCDC loan right at the beginning of fiscal year 18-19. And then economic development factors just kind of talks about your 18-19 budget compared to actual 18 and some different property and tax levy differences between 18 and 19. So again, that's a good source to see what really changed in the different funds. Pages 20-21 is the full accrual basis. This is the county-wide as a whole. And as I always say, it doesn't matter how much assets you have. If you have that much in debt, you're still at a break even, or if the debt is more, you're at a loss. So what's always important is the net position, which is on the bottom section of page 21. The one thing I do want to note is included in the governmental activities is the very start of your new employee group plan that you started at the beginning of fiscal year 18-19. However, there were some warrants that were deposited into that account at the very end of the year. So we had to show those as being collected by that new fund. So you are going to see financial statements on that new fund, even though it really didn't technically become operational until 18-19, since it collected the funds, we had to show those. So those are included in the governmental activities column. So for net position, at the end of the year, you had $22,797,000 for your net position for the county as a whole. $16,449 was invested in capital assets. The rest was basically in restricted, and you had a negative unrestricted of about $170,000, which if you compare it to last year was down. Last year it was a negative like $500 and some thousand dollars. So the unrestricted did go down quite a bit, and that has to go into relation to the bond, the debt, and how that has to be shown. So that's part of it. Which goes into there. You can see what the items are restricted for. Basically, they're restricted for general levy type of purposes, the supplemental, the hotel motel purpose, the jail improvements, courthouse security. Land acquisition took a large increase this last year, not only because of the land addition, but also because that donation that they received as well from that request. Was it Luke, I believe? Okay. And then the other purposes. So on page 22-23, how did the changes occur? What occurred? Again, this is on a full accrual, so we're not including capital asset purchases, we're not including debt payments, but we are including interest, we're including depreciation. So it is in a columnar approach. It is meant to show you what expenses for each of the different functions, and then what was generated for each of the different functions, whether it be through charges for services, those coded in the 400 to 500 series, any operating grants, restricted interest, or any capital grants, including like the Iowa Department of Transportation, any sort of farm to market money, any sort of thing like that they contribute is included in that capital grant, as well as for the county environment includes that land bequest to the county for conservation purposes is also included in there. So it really kind of shows you what the different functions are and whether they're basically generating enough through grants, contributions, services. How much did it really take of general dollars to cover that? And so that's where you want to go into to see once basically the expenses were covered up to, expenses exceeded what was generated by the different functions by $1,422,000. However, there was $5,698,000 of general revenues generated, quite naturally the most of it being property taxes, unified law levy, TIF, and then other general revenues, as you can see listed here. And we do include the drainage districts in here as well, so you do want to take note on that. So how did it change during the year? The statement of net position, after it was restated because of the new OPEB, increased by $4,275,000, and the Public Safety Commission increased by $143,000. So that as well, both of them had nice increases for the fiscal year, for the county as a whole. So then we go into the fund type on Exhibit C. Now this is the fund basis. This is meant to be looking on a more current basis. We're not including capital assets. We're not including long-term debt. This is more of a fund approach and what's available basically to be spent in 18-19, the current fiscal year you're in, not necessarily more long-term, and we break it down on a per fund basis. And again, so you have your assets listed, the liabilities, you have your deferred inflows, which used to be just called unearned revenue or deferred revenue. So basically, it amounts to anything that wasn't collected, wasn't available to be spent in 17-18, such as your property taxes, exceeding your receivable and TIF, and those that were not collected by August 31 of 2018. If it wasn't received 2 months after the end of the fiscal year, it's considered unavailable to be spent for 18-19 is how we have to do it. So that's what those undeferred inflows consist of. So what's in the different fund balances here? So for general, has $2,487,000, of which $56,000 was in prepaid, $171,000 was for supplemental, $31,000 was hotel motel purposes, $103,000 for courthouse and jail improvements, $617,000 for conservation land acquisition, basically means it's in that trust fund. And you have unassigned, which means general basic, of $1,509,000 basically available at the end of 18. Rural services had $357,000. Secondary roads had basically $4,080,000. Then you have your TIF area, which is basically a zero at the end of the year, because it pretty much all goes into pay the debt service at this point for that fiscal year. Then you have your new CFE project, that's that new fund that was created for your CFE urban renewal and the Tyler Avenue project. That's where the bond proceeds went into, and then where the expense, when we look at expenditures, we'll see that the bond issuance costs were paid out of there, as well as projects for Tyler Avenue related costs as well. That had $2,075,000 available at the end of fiscal year 18. The debt service for payment of your general obligation refunding notes for series 2013, just kind of waiting to that date to be paid off early, has $967,000 available for that purpose. And then when we look at schedules 1 and 2, we'll look at what the non-major funds are, which are all the smaller funds, and those have $258,000 combined. So as a whole, your funds, governmental funds, had $10,225,000 fund balance at the end of 2018. So on page 27, for all you accounting gurus who love reconciliations, we reconcile basically Exhibit A to Exhibit C, from the full accrual to the modified, and it shows you all the different changes we had to make to get those tied. I'd love to sit down and go over those with you, but I've got more important things to talk about right now, so if we want to, we can always talk about it afterwards. Then on Exhibit E is how did those fund balances change? As we said, it's important what's there, but how did they change during the year? And you're going to see consistently, it was a good fiscal year as far as fund balances and holding their own. You're going to see that for the major funds listed on Exhibit E on pages 28 and 29, they all had basically a nice increase or an increase. The general went up $680,000. Now, a lot of that, if you were to look back, would be in the conservation land acquisition, quite naturally, for the donation that it did receive. So that was a lot of it, but still the others went up as well, the other components. So that had a nice increase for the fiscal year. Rural services went up 97. Secondary roads went up 150. The amended ethanol eliminated its deficit position. The CFE, due to the proceeds received on the general obligations series 2017 and the premium, minus Tyler Avenue related costs, interest that was generated, ended up with that $2,075,000. So it eliminated its $48,000 deficit for those costs that were incurred before the proceeds came in. The debt service fund went up by $276,000. A lot of that's based on just the extra that was transferred in out of the project fund. We were looking later on in the non-major, we're going to see the rest of the project fund was cleaned out and moved in there, as well as the TIF proceeds that were received. And then we have our non-major funds went up $25,000, so they stayed consistent. So it went up as a whole, the funds went up $3.3 million from 6.8, so basically a 50% increase from 6.8 to the $10,225,000. And then on page 30, we have that wonderful reconciliation, Exhibit B to Exhibit D, and how did E, and how did the full accrual modified to the modified, and what are the different changes, and how the different OPEBs and long-term debts, and what gets included in full accrual but not in the modified and all that. Now, on page 31, you're going to see your new fund. That's for 18-19, your employee group health fund for your parcel self-funding plan. Since that money was basically the warrants were issued to that fund, we had to show it as collected. But since technically the fund didn't actually go into effect until July 1st, we showed it as unavailable revenues because technically they weren't available to be spent until July 1st. So basically you have $102,000 to start that fund, so you can probably make the first premium payment and pay some fees and stuff like that. But it has zero net position because it technically wasn't operational. And then on page 32, anytime you have an internal service fund, you have to show cash flow. Where did the money come from, and where was it spent on a cash basis? We just basically show how did the cash change during the fiscal year. Page 33, we just list your agency funds as a whole. In the schedules on 3 and 4, we'll look at the details of those, but it just kind of, your assets should always equal your liabilities because it's just money you're holding for other entities, basically acting as custodian for those funds until they so need them. Those are the major financial statements. Those are the ones we're actually given the opinion on in the audit report. Then we go on to the notes. We give them state as well. Here, I'm just going to kind of try to hit on those highlights. A lot of this is the same. You know, we talked about your accounting policies, what's included in your reporting, Nancy, how do we determine whether or not to include the drainage district? What 28Es have to be shown separately. We talk about on page 36 how the Public Safety Commission is its own component unit. It's related enough to the county, but we do show it as a separate column, and we talk about what happens to the transactions between the county and the Public Safety Commission, as well as what other boards you're on page 36 and 37. And then as a joint venture, we talk about the OCDC and how the county's funding is crucial probably for that, maintenance of that 28E organization and the entities, and your transactions with that particular entity. Then on page 37, we talk about what goes into the determination, what's included in the government-wide. Page 38, 39, we talk about the different fund structures. We talk about what goes into the accounting on page 39 through the measurements. We talk about full accrual, modified accrual, cash basis. When do we record a liability? When do we not? When do you recognize revenue? When do you recognize an expenditure? Pages 40, 41, we talked about all the different balance sheet type of funds and what those different accounts are, so you can kind of tell what's in them and what makes up those different assets, deferred inflows, deferred outflows, liabilities, so you can kind of understand that. We go all the way to 44, 45 on that. We talked about the budget security accounting on page 45. And then we get into listing cash. We talk about what the Treasurer's Office is allowed by Iowa code to invest in, and through your setting of an investment policy, what you allow her to invest money in if she so chooses. And we talk about what you have actually invested in and what the values are in your basically, the IPAID is truly the only investment other than CDs and money market type of funds that you have. So we talk about those. Page 3, we have to talk about when you owe money between different funds owe each other, or you owe money to public safety, or public safety owes it to you, or to an agency fund. We have to show back and forth which fund owes what other fund and what the purpose of those were on pages 46, 47. We talked about your inter-fund transfers that occurred during the fiscal year, and this is on a modified accrual basis, which would be different than your cash basis. So if you were to look at your strictly on your reports for the different year and look at cash in, cash out transfers would differ because cash basis is different than modified accrual, because some of them are considered loans and those don't count. But this shows from that standpoint what was in and out for those and between the different funds. Pages 48, 49, we give you more detail on capital assets, what was bought, what was sold, in 5 different category types. Increases, decreases, depreciation for both public safety and the county. We have to list what's due to other governments, which is a statutory requirement on page 49. Long-term liability, as kind of we saw earlier a little bit, we saw some of them listed in the MD&A, the ones that are true like a payable, like a loan type of thing, but then we also have to include on here compensated absences, which is considered long-term, unless you will see, unless someone retires or quits or is let go in the first 3 months after the end of a fiscal year, then we have to consider the current liability and not a long-term liability. We have to segregate those differently. But we list not only the different bonds. We talk about then your OCDC loan that has been paid off now. We talk about the general obligation loan with the, I'm trying to remember what you bought with that again. Oh, or the 369 one. Oh, this was the purchase of 41 acres at your Highway 9 and 60. And that's paid off now, so that was finished during the year. We talked about your 2013 A series bond, and what amortization schedules on that. We also talk about what it can be used for, we talk about the rights, we talk, that mature in, bonds that mature in years 21, 21, and you'll have the option to prepay, which I certainly think you'll take advantage of. And then we also talk about what happened during the fiscal year. We talk about the new bonds that were issued during the fiscal year, and shows you the amortization schedule on those, and talks about the different transactions that happened with those bonds that were issued in December of 17. We talk about the capital installment purchase with ex-Kubota, which has been taken care of, the drainage warrant. A year ago, they basically started treating stamped warrants now as a debt issuance. So we went from having to we have to basically show them, for Becky has to show them, Rochelle has to show them like an outstanding check. But then when we come to the audit, we have to put them back on the books like they're really in cash yet, and then we have to show them like they were a debt issuance and then a debt repayment. So a lot of in and out and change this and change that. That's one thing, a little frustrating. I think we get a little too happy sometimes on that. TAC 10, that was a capital lease for software through the public safety, and that has been paid off. Pension plan for IPERS. So basically, for any of you that are interested in IPERS, you certainly have in that first paragraph on page 53, footnote 8, we talk about the plan description. We talk about IPERS and how you can get a copy of their plan and their audit report on its website. And basically it talks about, so basically, starting a couple years ago, we had to say, what is your share of any unfunded liability for IPERS? And so we include that now as part of your long-term government-wide financial statement, your share of the payable. So if we look, so on this here, we talk about IPERS, we talk about what the plan benefits are, we talk about death and disability, we talk about contributions and how much was contributed. The big thing you kind of want to look here, at the bottom of page 58, it talks about how much you contributed during the fiscal year 17-18, and that is considered a prepayment, basically, because we're always a year behind. So when you're looking at these numbers, you're actually looking at the fiscal year ending June 30, 2017 share of IPERS, because they always give us a year lag so that they can get their reports ready. So on the top of page 58, so as June 30, 2018, the county's reporting a liability of $1,683,211 for your proportionate share of the net pension liability. So basically, if everybody were to retire when they figured they would, you would have your share of the unfunded liability as of June 30, 2018 was $1,683,000, while the Public Safety Commission was $212,000. So, it kind of depends on where it is in the year. As we all know, those stock markets and the different investments fluctuate in and out, so it definitely makes a difference when we talk about inflows and outflows and how those affect that calculation. We talk about here how we come up with those different inflows and outflows. Page 56, it talks about the actuarial assumptions, if you're really into that stuff. On page 57, if you're into investments, it tells you exactly where IPERS is investing their money in and what it expects as a rate of return. Now, I think we all need to get involved in the private equity if it's going to generate an 11.15 rate of return. That would be great. So, discount rate, how it's sensitive to the discount rate, so you can see how that liability will change just by what percentage it feels it's going to generate. And then on page 58, OPEB. OPEB was done, basically they decided to go the same route as they did for the IPERS, and now they're going to do OPEB basically following similar actuarial calculations. So basically, here we go on to talk about OPEB and all the different things there and what all the different rates are and how those healthcare rates will change those factors and the inflows and the outflows. I get the IPERS, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't quite get the OPEB yet from a practicality standpoint. IPERS, I understand with the environment and the importance of a pension plan and needing to defund it and disclosing that. The OPEB, to me, seems a little bit like carrying it a little overboard in what the practicality and the, purpose for your guys and your your management decisions, I don't quite, maybe I'm just not quite broad enough yet, so. Risk management, we talked about the ways you manage risk, we talked about your health insurance plan that's going into effect for 18-19 and how that fund was started, basically to collect the money in 17-18. New this year, we do have to now, they're going more, another change, they want more and more disclosures. So now they want us to disclose, starting in that fiscal year, development agreements. And they want to basically say, if you're going to have a development agreement, it's going to be public knowledge, it's going to be open to disclosure. So now we have to disclose active ones during fiscal year 17-18, not those that were approved but haven't gone into effect yet, what the agreements were, how much the rebate was scheduled to be, and how much it's been paid, and what's available yet to pay. So they're just going to more open disclosure when it comes to urban renewal type of areas. And then they also do with like tax abatements now, that was new last year as well, or 2 years ago already. What basically is the county getting versus the other entities and what it amounts from diverting property taxes from the town to the county versus other entities. And if other entities were doing it, how that affects the county. Again, they want a lot of disclosure. Intergovernmental agreement is your landfill, and it talks about what the landfill is and what you have done as assurance for that, and how you are a local government guarantee on that, and so it talks about that. Then we go on to your Northwest Iowa Care Connections Mental Health Region, and it talks about during 17-18 what region you were a part of and what the assets and liabilities and in your mental health county services fund was and what monies flowed in and out for those. And that's basically required because then the state has to tie these numbers to their report to make sure it jives with their records. So when they do Northwest Iowa Care Connections, everything jives for those. Deficit fund balances, again, those are TIP related. Those by nature are going to happen. We understand that TIP revenues, as they're collected, will satisfy those, but we do need to disclose those as well. Commitments would have been commitments that existed as of June 30, 2018, going for future years. Contingency, we talked about some different contingencies that were in effect as of June 30, 2018. And then we also talk about subsequent events, the major happening in 18-19 that was significant nature, and we talk about approving a contract on the Tyler Avenue payment on that. Estimates, we talk about that any financial statements involve estimates, so that's an important factor. And then on pages 65, 66, we basically explain the new OPEB and how that changed the beginning balances and where we were and how we ended up restating them too. Pages 68, 69 is your cash basis budget. The first column basically shows county, your governmental funds as a whole, which basically includes the drainage. The second column, we pull out the drainage because you don't budget for your drainage district on page 68. Then we get all the funds, basically, governmental funds that you budget for, and then we compare that to your original and a final amended budget. And then that last column is your actual versus your final amended budget and how it varies. So your revenues came in, receipts, on a cash basis came in $865,000 better than what your final budget amendment was. Your disbursements came in $710,000 better. Now your debt service did exceed your budget, and a lot of that was as a relation to how bond issuance costs, even though they withhold them out of your proceeds, you have to book them in like they came in. And so unfortunately that affects the budget because it doesn't really come in, so it's kind of hard to budget for something when you don't see it, but then when we come in, they make us say, you have to pretend like you got the money. So large portion of that was for that. So the disbursements came in $710 better, So as a whole, other financing sources came in with $41,000 better. So as a whole, you ended up, the ending fund balance came in $2,188,000 higher than what you had budgeted. So as a whole, the budget came out, compared to the actual positively. Then we do our cash basis versus our modified accrual basis, which is basically your exhibit C. So we're tying your cash basis budget on the prior pages to exhibit E, and what the adjustments were to tie to that. And then we did the same thing for Public Safety Commission. We talked about what their budget was versus what their actual, and basically they came in $117,000 better ending fund balance from what they anticipated. Their receipts came in $58,900 better. Their disbursements actually were below what they anticipated by $56,000. So they actually came out. Their excess was $2,000 positive. That doesn't look right. No, there's something wrong there. I'm gonna take a look at that. That's a typo. Because it's actually basically $16,000 better. That negative 56 shouldn't be negative. That should be a positive. So I apologize about that. Because you came in, as you can see, 145 minus 30,000 is not 2,200. So that is a typo. I'll get you a fixed one on that, and I apologize for that. So we'll get you a correction on that. So, and as well as the excess. The excess is actually basically $121,000 better. And so, as you can see, 117 plus 225 doesn't give you 456 either. So I apologize on that. We'll get you new pages on those. We'll get that corrected for you. So then on page 72, we talked about here, basically explains for your citizens how you go about setting your budget and what the different entities are that you're related to and how they set their budget. Page 73, we just talked about IFRS, and it lists the different percentages and what you've contributed to the IFRS and what your share of the payroll is and what percentage of payroll is compared to your liability. On page 74, we do the same thing for the Public Safety Commission for IFRS. Then on page 75 and 76 for the county and for IFRS, it lists your contribution for the last 10 years, as well as your employee IFRS covered payroll and what percentage of payroll you're paying it on. Then page 77, we talk about the different actuarial assumptions for IFRS. Page 78 and 79 is the new OPEB related disclosures, and what some of the different costs were and what percentages and how those came about, and those would again tie to the note. So then we get into your schedules. These are basically the non-major. Here's where we're giving an opinion on the total as a whole, not the individual funds. So here on pages 82 and 83, we list the different funds that we consider non-major and what their assets, liabilities, deferred inflows, and fund balances were. And then you can see what the assets were, what the ending fund balance. So, and basically we can kind of look at the same thing if we look on pages 84 and 85. You can look at the most important thing, the fund balance, and how did they change. First of all, we have in the first column on page 84, Schedule 2, we have the change in the fund balance in mental health went from 9,600, increased by 3,000 to 12,600. Unified law, by nature, just collects it and pays it to public safety, so that's zero. Recorders of records management went down by 5,200 from a $15,000 to $10,000 fund balance. The county attorney incentive, he had spent 5 and he collected 2, so that decreased by 3, so he has basically 2,300 left at the end of the fiscal year. Sheriff's asset forfeiture had no activity, so that stayed at 6,700. The project for the amended ethanol tip area, money was transferred into the debt service, as we talked about previously, and we looked at Exhibit E. The Senex Co-op tip, that had 23,700 collection more than it paid out, and So it had a deficit balance of 236, so it's down to 213 at the end of the fiscal year. And again, that'll keep going down as money is collected, and paid off. Then the windmills, that basically, what you collected for the cheat and tip area was paid in, collected, was paid out, and we still have that $3,000 to pay off on that. The Harris tip had no activity during the year. The drainage districts, increased by $127,000, to $214,000 fund balance from 87, and your REAP account dropped, by $9,900 from $75,000 to $65,000 fund balance for REAP. Then 86 and 87 is those different agency funds, so you can see by different agency funds. Primarily, it's in the form of cash being held by the treasurer's office, but it's also like the assessor's money that you basically help account for items of those sort of entities. So it lists what the assets were and what the liabilities and who they're due to. And then on page 88 and 89, we basically show what's the beginning liability, what was collected during the year by the county, what was paid out by the county, and what the ending balance owed to these different entities or for these different entities were at the end of the fiscal year. So you can kind of see the different changes in those. The great majority of them are property tax type of inflows, outflows. Page 90, you have your balance sheet for your Public Safety Commission. It has $519,000 of assets, $13,000 in liabilities, unavailable revenues of $29,000, which are basically prepaid revenues, where like the city will pay at the very end of the fiscal year for the next fiscal year. So we have to show that as unavailable because it's technically for the next fiscal year. And then the fund balance. So it had $56,000, basically $55,800 in non-spendable prepaid, and then unassigned for public safety at the end of fiscal year 18 was $421,000, so that $477,000. Then we give you that wonderful reconciliation of the Schedule 5 tying back to Exhibit A, full accrual to the modified. Then we list the modified accrual, revenues, expenditures, other financing sources. So how did the fiscal year change? How did the fund balance change? You had revenues of $1.4 million in revenues, expenditures of $1,261,000. So your revenues exceeded your expenditures by $142,000. You had $5,700 from a sale of a fixed asset. So public safety increased during fiscal year by $148,500, so it went from $328 to the $477. And again, now we give you the wonderful reconciliation of Schedule 7 again to Exhibit B, and how we go about coming up what the changes are on that. Nice little tool on pages 94 and 95 will give you Schedules 9 and Schedule 10. It gives you the last 10 years. It's a very good comparison for the last 10 years, kind of seeing how revenues have changed over the years. You can kind of see, in yours, it has been kind of a nice, pretty steady. It took a nice increase this past year, but kind of a steady increase, as well as expenditures, and how over a 10-year period how they changed. So you can see by function, by revenue classification, gives you a real good comparison tool as to how have the different revenues changed, how have the different functions changed, what's been said. You know, you can do a lot of different analysis. There are percentage changes and come up with, okay, why did this go up? And it's a wonderful tool to be able to look back if you want to say, oh, well, this function has increased, what is the main reasoning for that? So if you ever want to go over that, we can certainly kind of look back through the records and figure that out. Now that sort of analytics I do enjoy. OPEB, not so much. This sort of analytics I do enjoy. Same thing with Public Safety Commission. So you can kind of see what the different intergovernmental revenues were for the last 10 years, the different charges for service, miscellaneous, and then by different program categories, how much has been spent on the different programs for public safety. Then you get our report on compliance. That basically is meant to state we look at internal controls and compliance as a part of the audit. We're not giving an audit opinion, we're not looking at all the different laws, we're just doing tests. This is just our opinion, please take it accordingly. As we're also constantly reminded, we're not attorneys, they don't want us to act as an attorney. You do have a county attorney, so they say anything that's a legal determination, we are to defer to the county attorney. So it's just, we're supposed to give from an accountant's viewpoint what we think, but then it always comes down to you as the management, the county attorney, as to what you feel. So the first section is internal control. Again, this is in a perfect world if you had all the money available to spend, and you could do it so that way in a manner that you could hire a position for everything. That's the way we have to come across on this. We realize that's not a feasibility. So what we're taking a look at, first of all, on page 102 is internal deficiency, segregation of duties. Again there, what we're saying is try to use staff as much as available. Staff, yourselves as officials, different departments, to try to do overseeing, try to segregate duties as much as possible. And here we just give some suggestions on different ways possibly. Inventory records, again, we like to see that there's accounting for all the different inventory that flows in and out, and it's size capped, and how is it, where is it going, and that now someone's not going to your gravel pile and taking it off, and then so someone can identify that, and that sort of thing. So again, and your inventory, again, ideal world, you'd have a perpetual inventory system. There comes dollar practicalities, however. So take that to the county procedures manual. You pretty much, as a county government as a whole, for solutions do have that, but when you're getting into your individual accounting funds, maybe like, for instance, like when we start talking, like the sheriff's office, for instance, how they have to do their own accounting for their own individual offices, those sort of things. If something happens to, for instance, Brenda, would someone else be able to step in and do what she does, or Judy, or someone like that, just to give that as an example, or Carol downstairs. Is there someone else who could step in and do her duties and be able to take from information that's available to do that? So that's what we're talking about, county procedures manuals, and unfortunately if something happens that someone can step in. Information systems, again, with the whole viruses and hacking and whatnot, again, we're constantly looking at, is there different ways that the county can protect, even though it's all public knowledge anyway, we don't want anybody coming in and changing that public knowledge to some sort of benefit of their own. So again, we just want to make sure that there's different informational systems that identify job rotations. That goes back to segregation of duties. If something happens to someone, can someone step in? That's what's important there. Collection procedures, again, we've talked about this for a while, just taking a look at setting the different collection policies, is there different things you want people, like for instance, primarily it would be on jail stays, ambulance costs, those sort of things. Setting a policy that says this is what you do after so many days, and this is how we want you to proceed to collect it, and items of that nature. That's what we're looking for there. And again, these are just suggestions. Usage of the county vehicles equipment. Again, we normally see this as more of an issue when gas prices spike, but, is there control set that someone isn't filling up their own vehicle, that sort of identification, just to, ways of looking at, is there ways of identifying, putting the mileage of when you fill it up and when you refill it, and someone testing that on an occasional spot test basis to say, whoa, I can't be getting $5 miles to the gallon on this vehicle. That sort of thing is what we're referring to there. So it's probably more the departments with like the fleets of vehicles, such as your secondary roads, your sheriff, your conservation, and some of them are doing that. So, but again, just for all departments. Ambulance records, Sandy's done a nice job of improving them over the years. Again, she just needs to keep on working on some of the bugs on those and making sure that it ties with, the PCC records and all the different records on that. Financial reporting, this is basically if we have to do any sort of adjustments, like adjustments to do the full accrual and that IOPEB and that IFRS, they basically say, technically we had to help with that, so that's a comment. We realize that that's not necessarily the case, but that's something, again, they're pushing for, so they say you have to identify that basically, and that's what that comment is meant to state, that we did assist with the audit report financials in order to get them to be fairly presented. Just to disclose that. Management procedures, a lot of these comments, a lot of it is due to dollars and cost value benefit, but once we see comments that occur more than a couple years, we have to identify those and say, is there different things that you could be evaluating as a board and as different governing boards to take a look at those, and is there ways that we can eliminate some of these or at least minimize them. Payroll issues, it's come to our attention that there's been some issues with different payroll type of things. We noted, for instance, there's some different disagreements we noticed with the handbook union agreement as to what was actually done in place during the year. That's our understanding. Some different departments, there's been some questions about the timesheet of that nature. Again, I think it just comes down to educating people, educating the departments, that the employees realize that they gotta fill out timesheets, that they gotta be accurate on those timesheets. The department head has to attest to those, and when they're assigning them, they're attesting and verifying that those are accurate hours. And then just kind of going back to making sure that the handbook or the union agreement is followed, and if it is not, if there's an exception, they need to get board approval, whatever board their governing board might happen to be. So here, again, payroll is just a touchy issue, so again, we just talk about there and taking looks at ways of maybe to help to make sure that those are accurate as well. And also help the auditor's office maybe kind of, we need this info, we need this info, we need this info. So that is internal control. Those are just suggestions. Take them as such. If you want to go over those, go in more detail, I can certainly stay afterwards and talk to you afterwards about that. Statutory comments, the budget, we did notice the debt service budget did exceed it, as well as the courthouse department exceeded the amount appropriated. You want to try to amend those before that happens in the future. You understand based on the circumstances why it happened. You know, it's not just wasn't late and went over, so we do understand that. Questionable expenditures, again here, the major thing is, which is hard nowadays, we realize everything's kind of just thrown on the credit card, but we want to see an actual invoice that supports a credit card. We don't want to just see a meal, $10.22 meal at Applebee's or something, just to give you an example. We need to see that detail, because we need to see if there's more than one meal, then who's the second person eating with you, items of that nature, that becomes critical. Even if it's a lodging, we got to see if there was, alcohol put on there, if there was more than one person, is there movies bought, all that comes down to public purpose. Try not to, sales tax, we noticed some instances where maybe sales tax didn't need to be paid. However, when you're probably buying it and then getting reimbursed, it's kind of hard to go into a place and say, well, I don't have to pay the sales tax. We get that. So it's just a way of looking at that. So the biggest thing is credit card slips and keeping the support for those in the detail. Travel expenses, we noted no problems. However, we do note, since a lot of it's on credit card slips with no detail, it's hard to state whether or not there's really any problems. So we kind of clarify that we didn't identify any problems there. Now, the business transactions, here is different business transactions. Again, it's hard there to state, we're not attorneys, so they basically say throw it in there. If you exceed the 1,500, then we have to talk about, the county attorney needs to say, what is a way we can do to remedy that, so that way we don't have to put that in there. So we're not stating these are all issues, but we do have to note that, and we'll have to talk with the county attorney as to, okay, does he feel they're okay? Then we just talk with that, and then we make notations and go forward. Like, today I noticed how you, deferred on the bottom of water ones, stuff like that nature, so we just wanna take a look at that. And if you're gonna put, like, for bid, if you're gonna put it down in the courthouse, like at the beginning of the year, take the bid, I'd recommend you keeping having someone sign off when it was posted, and keeping a copy of that, and then having someone, like, for instance, you attesting, Rochelle, or someone from your office attesting it was posted, and then having someone else, or one of the board members attest that they thought it also was posted. And then keeping that as proof for us, if the county attorney feels that that suffices, then that way we've got proof. When we come to audit, we see it, and it was attested to, so. Bond coverage is in accordance with statutory. Supervisor's minutes, we just noted on the conservation land acquisition, when you do your budgets, you should probably be approving exactly what money is gonna go into land acquisition, you know, what funds they have the right to get, whether it be the different rents and items of that nature.
So during the budget then, or during the fiscal years, we approve that, like beginning of the fiscal year?
I think it'd be good to do it at the budget time, so you're identifying it, but as long as it's approved in the board minutes, whether it be done with the budget or at the beginning of a fiscal year, to me it makes sense to do it at the beginning of a fiscal year and say, for this fiscal year, these are the items that we feel Polk County Conservation Land Acquisition can collect. Now, when we talk to the state, they say they're the only ones, their counties actually collect it into general basic, and then they transfer it out into conservation land acquisition. They said technically that is the correct way. Now, they acknowledge their counties are probably the only ones doing that. They said technically they would be fine, but they do feel that you, the board of supervisors, should approve what money can go into the land acquisition for its rents, for anything of its funding. They said as long as you as a board, but again, they give us the, well, ask the county attorney, don't ask us.
So every year we should be, the board should approve?
Probably should do it on, like, so I would say in July, for instance, the board should probably approve at the first meeting what rents can go into land acquisition. Other than, like, statutorily, they have to have their interest, the different, you know, the things that could go into general basic or could go into land acquisition, mainly, I think in the rent is the first thing that pops into my head would be the largest one. Can anybody think of any other one?
Camping fees.
Camping fees would be good, yep. Because like, for instance, Lyon County does do that, they'll approve at the beginning of the year, for instance, how much, what percentage gets to go into the general basic and what gets to go into land acquisition for their Lake La Jolla fees, for instance. So, it made more sense to me, if you want to do it at budget time from budgetary purpose, but to me it would make sense at the beginning of a fiscal year, because then it's easier for us to see it too, so.
So we'll decide on this again next year.
What's that?
We'll decide it on this again next year.
Well, it's actually implemented this next time, because then we can say, well, we told you it's so late. I know it is just 2 days, so that's fine. So then that's when you remind me, you told me 2 days before the end of the fiscal year. Deposits and investments, I got 2 minutes, so deposits and investments, we just noted that the depository amount at the state exceeded it and at Melvin State. So again, there's really no fee, there used to be like a fee for increasing your depository resolution. Again, as long as you as the board don't mind, maybe you should just want to increase that amount, or Becky should, then if you do want to keep it to those levels, then Becky should look at that and come up with ways to keep it under the amount. Read your income compliance with, extensions in compliance, urban renewal reports. We did notice the, Department of Management, there was a few urban renewal areas, and Sheila and I are working on getting those straightened out, and that would probably be Jamie. TIP reporting, same thing with the certification forms, and a lot of that comes down to that whole complexity of the, to be honest, how much bond proceeds are available in the debt service, because that has to go onto those calculation forms. So it's not just as easy as what comes in and what goes out. You have to take into consideration fund balances and take that back and how much interest and changes. So that, again, each year gets better. Board minutes for the veterans board assessors review, we just noticed some things with their minutes and you know, compliance and unanimous voting, how they need to follow. Outstanding checks over a year are supposed to be canceled and put back on the books. We just noted that there was some longer than a year, so according to the code, that should be done. The treasurer's annual report, we just noted a couple different funds on that, where, for instance, those warrants that were paid out at the end of the year, they weren't put into the system on June 30, so technically that money wasn't on that annual report, as well as some of the different fund detail has to be all separate. So that's a solutions issue to get rectified. Financial conditions, those deficits, but they're in the TIPs. The TIP certification, we noted that one company was late in getting the report, so technically hold that money until they get you their reports and then pay them out after they get you the report. They weren't that late, they were 26 days late, so that wasn't so bad. But technically, if they don't get you the reports, you're supposed to hold their money until they do. The OCDC, we just noted that based on the formula that it's coming up with, that probably should be paid from rural services, and I recognize you did do that this fiscal year in 18-19. So, going forward, you probably want to do that, talk with the county attorney as far as prior years. Capital assets, we just noted that we had to do some changes to that. That comes down to adding, subtracting, those sort of natures, identification purposes, as well as the code of ordinances. It was past the 5 years, it hadn't been updated by the end of the fiscal year, maybe, I don't know, subsequently probably has been, so on that. And it was 12:02. So, question. Like I said, I realized some of you guys are going to go. I'd be happy to stay and visit for if anybody wants to go over anything in the audit report, particularly. Yes, sir.
I'm confused by this. Look, this says that we paid the bill for Hawkeye Point late, and ended up with $764,000.
Oh, okay. What that is, thank you. I'm going to go down. Okay, so on the OCDC loan, it stated in the minutes way back when you approved it that it was going to get paid off. It was going to be amortized over like till 2028, but it was going to be paid off in, I believe, April of like 18. But it technically wasn't ever approved in the board minutes to not do it. So then that extra interest represents from when the original board said it was going to pay it off to when it actually was paid off. Technically, it should have been put in the board minutes that it was decided to extend the loan till July. Because if we go back into those board minutes, it stated that it was really going to be paid off back, and I can look it up back like 5 months before it actually was. Because it was supposed to have a balloon payment. Once they redid that amortization schedule, it got convoluted because it was always amortized over a longer period, but there was a due date on it. So we had to note that technically it was never approved in the board minutes to pay it later, so we had to note how much extra interest was paid by not paying it off on that particular date. Now granted, you probably would have to get interest on something else, but Yeah, so technically that's what that is. And I can get you the exact dates if you want. So,
Yeah, we probably budgeted for it the next
fiscal year, yeah.
So that's why we didn't
Yeah,
pay it off.
and it was confusing, because it was always amortized over till 2028, but when the board first took out the loan, there was a due date. It was basically amortized over 10 years longer than when the due date was. There was supposed to be a balloon payment for the terms.
So when we renegotiated, we made a balloon payment, basically.
You made a
Negotiated interest, but we didn't.
But technically,
Clearly identified the.
it didn't change the balloon, it didn't change the balloon date anywhere when that was redone.
We had made a payment, a substantial payment.
Yes, and then you returned, did the terms, because you lowered the interest, so you really saved more than $700 by doing that. You know, as an auditor, we got to be the picky one.
So we approved in April or something to pay it, but we didn't say that we would pay it off in July of the next.
So when you redid it and renegotiated the terms, the payoff date was never changed in that. From the very original time it was approved, it said a payoff date of this, and then it said we're gonna renegotiate terms, so it never changed the payoff date. Very good question.
Should accept the auditor's report.
You should, if you wanna wait till next time, look through it and see if there's anything else you have questions about, I understand. But yeah, the audit report should be approved sometime.
Come on, this fiscal year, right?
Since I gave you 2 days.
I'll make a motion to accept it.
We have a motion in support to accept the audit report for fiscal year 17-18. Any further comments, discussion? All those in favor, signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Okay. Good reports. Good courthouse committee reports. I got development, but we're already past you guys identified new.
Motion was here.
Do that, motion board. I think everybody beat you. Mr. Jones and Mr. Gore, support, or motion to support to adjourn. All those in favor, signify with aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign.
The maturity date on that was March 1, 2018, for the